Take a minute.
We ready to go, Justin?
I'm gonna fix the old.
I will call this meeting of the Blue Lake City Council. I'm calling this meeting of the Blue Lake City Council Tuesday, November 26, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you establish a quorum of the council, please? Here. Mayor from Pencil. Present. Councilmember Tawny. Here. Councilmember Eckert.
Here.
Councilmember Hire.
Here.
Thank you. We are on item 3, approval of agenda. I'll come to council first. Is there anyone that would like to move anything around in the agenda? It's a very full agenda this evening.
I would like to bring the discussion about security at the power plant forward to above between 8 and 9.
Well, it hasn't been agendized, so I don't think we can
I'll see it.
talk about it anyway tonight if it's going to be moved off of the consent calendar.
Well, it was supposed to be an agendized item for discussion, and I think that we are able to discuss it where it is. So I don't know why we wouldn't be able to move it.
Well, I don't,
We could just
The other
we could just take the manager's report.
I
And
think
which is-
the other thing too is that there might be a liability concern, something that might have to be put onto not on the public component of the agenda.
Well,
That's
I guess that could be
something that
decided when we have it
I
open.
think that might be something that we might have to talk about. I mean, has there been attorney input on that?
There has. So if you want to have a discussion outside of what the what my recommendation is for that item, then that needs to go under a closed session,
Okay.
and that would go under potential litigation.
Okay.
So it that is the recommendation from your attorney.
Okay.
Any other changes anyone would like to make?
Well, do we want to leave it do we want to leave that item then on the consent calendar or move it to a closed session item for the 10th?
I think it should go to a closed session item then.
Okay.
I think it.
Okay.
Okay, so then it's coming off of this item 11.
If you want to diverge from the item, what's recommended in the item itself, then you need to do that under a future agenda item and move that to a session under a closed session under potential litigation.
Right. So we'll just pull that component when we get to council correspondence. Or, I'm sorry, item 11, reports of council and staff. We'll pull that and then add that to future agenda items.
So we
when
don't
we get
need
to
to
12.
change the agenda
No.
for that. Okay.
No.
Any other changes anyone would like to recommend on council? Anybody from the public? Lots of people on Zoom this evening. Don't see any hands. Okay, back to council for a vote on the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion made to approve the agenda as delivered, seconded, made by Angela Shull, seconded by Elise Scafani. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4 is public comment. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the City Council that is relevant to the scope of authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. The Council may provide up to 15 minutes for this public input session. To assure that each individual presentation is heard, the Council may uniformly impose time limitations of 3 minutes to each individual presentation. The public will be given the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda at the time the Council takes up each specific agenda item. Is there anyone here for public comment? And I see a hand.
Oh, wow.
Lori Ponte and then Becky. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought I was unmuted, but I guess I wasn't. So you can hear me okay now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So on November 14th, I sent an email. It was addressed to you, Mayor Jones, Councilperson Scafani, and Mandy Mager, because I understood that you were the three that worked on the agenda items. In this email, I had asked that if there could be an update on both the Storyland and Danco projects at this current meeting that we're in. Um, and I did get a response from you, Mayor Jones, the next day, stating that you felt like it's up to the new council to have that review and wanted to put that off. My only concern is that I had asked that these emails be included in the correspondence for tonight's meeting. And after looking through the agenda, it looks like they were left out. So I just wanted to make sure that my email had been heard to the general group, even though it wasn't included in the correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I normally, during public comment, I would be doing this later during council correspondence, but we're not allowed to speak during that time. So I would just wanted to say about the letter from Jason Cruz that's in council correspondence. I watched that meeting and I just do not see what he had to say there was appropriate. I just was a little confused as to why he would have anything to say about what Elise had done. She did a wonderful job at speaking up at that meeting. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's one more.
It's Julie.
Julie. Thank you.
Thank you all for having Zoom. I really appreciate it. I've scrambled as much as I can to get every critter in my barn as quiet as possible. I just really want to thank you all. Shoal, Jones, Edgar, you've all done a really good job, and I really do thank you. And I hope to see continuance within our commissions and stuff. Chris, I had mentioned before about a public works report. I think that still would be really fun to do that. Other jurisdictions do that, and it's really a nice connection between public works and the community. And I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work throughout the year. The public's on Zoom, the public in house. And I think we've got a lot of good solutions coming our way. And I think we've got a lot better dialogue coming our way. And I'm very proud of all of that. And I'm proud of everybody in this community. So remember that when we think we want to judge others, like we're all trying hard, but at the same time, we're all just trying to have the same consensus and the same seat at the table a little bit. So as we're getting into Thanksgiving, let's be thankful. This farmer just is very thankful, and I want everybody else in our community to be very thankful too. Okay, I'll be back. I got more too.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes. Ted Hales.
I just wanted to say I echo Becky's comment about the letters from Jason Cruz. Having watched the videos and actually read transcripts of the actual words that were said by Elise Scafani in response to the various subjects that were talked about, they don't really accurately reflect what actually happened there and seem to be rather, well, rather self-serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on a non-agenda item?
Hi, this is Jean.
Hi, Jean. We can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Becky and Ted. I was at the meeting with the safety committee meeting that Jason Cruz is speaking of. And my big concern, which I believe that Elise did a very good job of pointing out that the information that was shared at that meeting was not nefarious, I believe is the word that she used. And I have concerns that what was said at the meeting was beyond the scope of the safety committee. The safety committee, and I expressed that during the meeting, the safety committee is an advisory committee. And the words that were spoken during the meeting kind of pushed the limit as far as policy and who makes policy. And I would actually like to have a review of what happened during that meeting to clarify the position of the council on the direction of the safety committee and the policy infringement. I saw it as a policy infringement on the council on who was directing policy. And we can discuss that at a future meeting as far as putting that on a further agenda, but I would like to see that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Any other public comment this evening on a non-agenda item? Okay, seeing no more hands, we move on then to item 5, which is our Humboldt County Association of Governments Unmet Transit Needs Public Hearing. The Humboldt County Association of Governments, HCOG, conducts yearly outreach to identify and quantify unmet transit needs in our community and the region. HCOG staff will present the unmet transit needs process via Zoom, including providing information on how residents can participate in the process. The city will hold a public hearing on December 10th, 2024 to allow the public the opportunity to present their concerns and needs, and a survey is available for those that wish to present their concerns online or via written survey. Do we have someone from HCOG on Zoom here?
Sally Nielsen. Hopefully everyone can hear me over in Blue Lake. I'm in Eureka. And echo one of the public speakers and express my appreciation for enabling me to participate this evening via Zoom. So I appreciate that opportunity. So I have a presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and hopefully we have no tech. I'm going to send a little request as that gets sorted out. Or it can be, the city has it also in-house, so it could be shared that way too. So let's see if that's, all right, we're in business. Super duper, everybody. So here we go. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. All right. We're in business. Good news. All right. So, like I was saying, all the slides that are in this slide deck that you're seeing, they've already been provided to the city clerk to be shared with the residents and with the council. And following my presentation this evening, is just to open the public hearing to allow residents an opportunity to comment on transit needs. And we'll go ahead and take those in, and then there'll be, as indicated in the agenda item, a follow-up meeting on December 10th. And I want to, before I get started, for even folks who may ride transit, who may have never ridden transit, all input is welcome and is valuable because it's used as documentation to support grant applications for improving transit service. So that's definitely welcome. And one more point, public comment is being accepted through the end of the year for this unmet transit needs cycle. I need to move this thing, get this thing to go away. All right, let's go. So, this slide's just giving a brief overview of the unmet transit needs process and kind of the foundations. So the unmet transit needs process comes out of the Transportation Development Act, which is a part of state law and provides funding for transit. An unmet transit need is a public transportation need that is not being met by the current transportation system. And the unmet transit need, first you identify if there are unmet transit needs in the community, and then there are those that have been expressed in the community. Those are then evaluated to determine if they are reasonable to meet. So as part of that process, the existing public transportation system is evaluated for its adequacy. And locally, how we obtain HCOG obtains this input is like this hearing tonight, and others have been held throughout the county and in the cities, releasing the online survey, and folks can provide written comments via email, or they can even call the HCOG office. And I have information at the end of the slide deck about that. So first thing is, are there unmet transit needs? Are these out in the community? And there are some criteria that are come out of the Transportation Development Act, but those standards can be locally modified by the HCOG board so long as they continue to meet the state law. So in some, an unmet transit need, it could be trips that have been requested by residents who do not have access to public transportation or specialized transportation. It could also be requested trips from residents who do not have the means to travel for medical care, shopping, social recreational activities, their jobs, education. It could also be transportation services that were identified in a regional transportation plan, and that there's sufficient broad-based community support, which means that persons who will likely use the service on a routine basis have demonstrated support. So in short, that's what the unmet transit needs are. And then the reasonable to meet criteria, the service has to be operationally feasible and financially sustainable, which means there's adequate roadways and it's safe to operate. There's sufficient funding that's been identified and is available for 3 years to cover the marginal operating cost of that service. The service must be projected to meet the minimum marginal fare box return ratio of 10% within 2 years. It doesn't reasonable to meet criteria doesn't you don't get into a comparison of transit needs versus the needs for streets and roads. And the performance of, so if a service is launched as a result of this process, its performance is evaluated regularly following implementation the first couple years of service for its performance. There is an expectation that when a new service is launched, that it's not the optimal ridership is not immediately met. So there's, but to see if the ridership and participation does increase over time. So this slide just gives an overview of the cycle, and the unmet transit needs cycle is an annual process. And so we're in this the public comment period, which runs through the end of the year. Following that, the public comments that are received will be compiled and reviewed with the transit providers. A report will be prepared. It will be presented to the Social Services Technical Advisory Committee, which provides recommendation on the draft report of findings to the HCOG board, public review of the draft, and then ultimately looking at adoption by the HCOG board in May of 2025. So there are transit needs that are heard fairly consistently through this process on an annual basis. So the need for more frequent service, earlier and later service during the workdays, Sunday service on RTS, that's the regional route, and later night service on Friday and Saturday between Arcata and Eureka. So these are things that are frequently come up from and as a result of this process. So just in terms of ridership, kind of just some recent trends. The blue bar on the far left of these graphs for RTS and ETS represent the fiscal year 2019 to 2020. And then that orange one, it would be a pandemic and the very big dip in ridership that was seen across the board. But the numbers are continuing to improve by and large for everybody. The routes and services operated by HTA. And so this slide is showing Southern Humboldt on the far left, Willow Creek in the middle, and Dial-A-Ride on the right. So there's still a lot of catch up from where ridership was at the before the pandemic. And I did hear one question was, where did all the riders go? The thought is that that some folks are still working from home, and that some of the colleges, HSU, CR, they're still providing online learning. So with those opportunities, there's not as much ridership. It hasn't caught up to the previous levels, but generally, it has been improving. Dial-A-Ride did see a dip in this last fiscal year. So, but overall, total ridership, HTA on the HTA system was over 480,000 passenger trips in this last fiscal year. And this graph just gives kind of a similar information just over a longer span of time, and showing that between 2022 and 2023, the ridership grew 24%, and then the more recently it continued to increase, but at a slower rate. And Arcata Mad River, very similar trend of increasing ridership, even though Cal Poly HSU enrollment has basically been flat. So that's what this information is showing. So in terms of HTA and what's going on there, and some of their more recent accomplishments, and also programs that they're launching, adding hydrogen fueling station and hydrogen buses, the development of an intermodal transit center in Eureka, and they were very recently awarded a grant for $18.7 million to expand the fleet of vehicles that are lower emission, improve the availability of information for transit riders. That would be arrival and departure information, including at the stops, some capital improvements so that information could be displayed at bus stops, and just an increase in frequency of service. Additionally, as you may have seen, there's unified branding and fares across their routes. It's a $2 fare. There's still discounts available for riders. They also have implemented tap to pay, and then they have launched a soft launch for a pilot project called Flex Rider, which is micro transit. This is on-demand shared rider service that operates from bus stop to bus stop. This has been launched in the greater Humboldt Bay area. And what it does is it uses available spots on dial-a-ride buses because those are by reservation service. And also the North State Express that launched earlier this year, and for $2 go from Eureka to Ukiah in a similar amount of time as driving a private vehicle. This operates during the weekdays, and then from there you can use the Mendocino transit system to connect down to Santa Rosa, and then from there you could actually take other transit to reach the Bay Area. And going north, you can actually connect up to Willow Creek, or not Willow Creek, excuse me, sorry, Crescent City. And if people are in the room or in the community, they have questions or would like to provide input, this is two ways to do it. You can email the HCOG office. You can also call the HCOG office. And if folks are interested in taking the online survey, it's 100% anonymous. It's available in both English and Spanish. It'll take less than 10 minutes, and it's available at these two URLs. And this information, like I said, is available as a PDF to the city, and we can make that available so that could be posted and shared broader than outside this evening. So that's it for the slideshow, and I'd be happy to answer any questions there may be.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was very complete, and we appreciate it. And we will have our public comment period at our December 10th meeting. So you gave us an overview, I believe.
We're going to ask that you open this for a public hearing tonight as well.
Oh,
so we'll have a couple of opportunities.
Okay. I didn't see that on the agenda here. All right. So are there any questions from council about the information?
I have a question. I was told that there was a local survey done in the last year, just after our Rancheria operated transit had ended. Quite a bit of activity happened here in Blue Lake to try to find what other options might be available, and there was a survey done. And I don't know if you are in possession of that survey, or if you can make any comments about that survey, or what information you've been able to glean from that, and how that may or may not be affecting this process.
Yeah, I don't know much about that survey. It's not a survey I'm in possession of. It may have been done. I think it was done by HTA, but that's the extent of my knowledge of it. It's not something I have access to.
Any other questions from council? Okay, so we are opening up a public hearing at this point. I will do so by asking folks to weigh in if they'd like on our unmet transit needs for the year. Yes.
Hello, I am Sandy Bennett. I live here in Blue Lake.
Could you speak into the microphone?
You can pull it down.
Yeah, just pull, sorry.
I'm Sandy Bennett. I live here in Blue Lake. I was one of the ones that started up that survey. The survey was given to to the city manager. So she yeah, we had that meeting when Brad Pratt came and the survey will be available to the council and to you. I'll work that out soon. And so I want you to know that there is a survey that was done here in Blue Lake.
And did you say that there were about 100 people that were surveyed?
Yeah, there was about 100 people surveyed.
And how did that survey get distributed? Was it people came to the resource center to fill it out, or you went door to door?
I went not only to the door, we stood out in front of Murphy's, and people filled out the survey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Any other public on this item? Lori Ponte?
I think she forgot to put her hand down before.
Oh, it's been up for a while.
Julie, though, that's up.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on then to Julie. Did you have a comment about the unmet transit needs?
Yes, thank you for acknowledging Zoom. Our presenter, it reduces transit, parking. That's a big topic in this county. It helps for everybody that's working in family and disability. So I really appreciate our presenter at the beginning being able to really appreciate that and be able to screen share with us. And thank you, Elise, for having discussion and our prior speaker. And then back to the presentation. Thank you for giving like public comment period disclosure. Thank you very much for doing that. I'm really excited to see some really productive representation that we're going to have from our city going into HCOG here shortly. And they're given, HCOG's been given a lot by the county to oversee. And I really am excited to see where this goes. And I'm excited to have some really motivated participation in that. And I think that Access Humboldt, they have all the HCOG meetings. That's how I get to listen as I clean and do stuff on my farm and keep up. I really appreciate that. So if anybody's curious what's been going on in this process, Access Humboldt has all the recordings. And they could use a lot more public speakers, just to be honest. Some speakers along the way have disclosed why ridership has been down. Joanne McGuire from Arcata, she's an avid transit user and speaker for a lot of public transit stuff throughout Arcata and Eureka. And I just feel like, how can we keep this feasible with the lowered fees and going hydrogen? And I'm just, the grid, everything that we're going with these goals with transit, I think it does need a lot of review. But at the same time, I really appreciate this presentation. I think it's an important time to take advantage of public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment on our unmet transit needs? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And back to council. I guess we've fulfilled our duties there. So
Mayor Jones, can I just clarify too
Yeah.
that the survey that Sandy was referring to,
yes,
that played a big role in our relationship with HTA and getting the Willow Creek route. And they are using that survey and that data to look at microtransit and to look at other programs. So that survey was really valuable. It was disseminated amongst transit operators and staff. And I just wanted to make sure that that was recognized, that the work from that survey hasn't been lost by any means, and it is kind of an ongoing tool that's being used to look at additional ridership options.
thank you. Okay, we will move on then to item 6, presentation and adoption of City of Blue Lake fiscal year 2023 audit, presentation and action. Brett Jones, auditor from JJA CPA, will present the final draft audit for fiscal year 2023. Upon presentation, the council may choose to accept the audit via motion. So do we have Scott here this evening? Brett's on Zoom. Oh, Brett. I'm sorry, Brett.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
All right. Great. Thank you very much for having me on the call tonight. Yeah, so I'm presenting the final draft of the financial statements. Last month's meeting, we presented a draft of the report, so we're coming back with the final. As I mentioned last time, we issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and you can find it on the first page of the report. It states, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, each major fund, and aggregate remaining fund information of the city. So as part of the audit, our responsibilities are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Reasonable assurance is a high level but not absolute assurance. In performing the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, we exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism. That is to say, we are independent of management of the city. We identify the risk and material misstatement of the financial statements and design and perform procedures to address those risks. Our procedures typically consist of testing transactions and balances in the financial statements. Additionally, we obtain an understanding of the internal controls relevant to the city and report on any findings that we may have. We evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies used and conclude if there's any conditions that raise substantial doubt about the city's going concern. The biggest difference between this report and the previous one is the inclusion of management's discussion and analysis on pages 4 to 14. The purpose of the MD&A is to provide analysis of the government's financial activities in a narrative form. This section is prepared by management. We do not prepare this section, and it is a good section of the report to read first. Government financial statements are prepared under a dual basis of accounting. That is, we have the government-wide financial statements. Starting on page 17, these are prepared under the full accrual basis of accounting. And then we'll have the fund financial statements starting on page 22. These are prepared under a modified accrual, more similar to a cash basis. And then after the financial statements themselves, there are the notes. These just provide additional information about financial disclosures and the city's policies. In addition to the audited financial statements, we issue a communications letter to the city council. This letter has additional information about the audit. It highlights management's responsibilities, any uncorrected or corrected misstatements that we may have had, which we had none. It would be in that letter. So we did have one reportable finding. This is a continuation of the one we had last year, which is just involves timeliness of the report. The state requires the financial statements to be completed and filed within 1 year at the end of the fiscal year, and we've gone past that date now that it's November. So that was the only finding that we had. Overall, the audit went very well, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the city council may have.
I was happy to see that our citywide revenues increased by about $615,000 and expenses decreased by about $475,000. So that was good news, I thought. How are we doing for getting the next audit done in a timely manner?
We'll talk to management of the city, talk to Amanda, and get it on the schedule. So,
Thank
so
you.
once we get this one wrapped up tonight, we'll go ahead and start on the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you. Other questions from the council? Any comments from staff concerning the audit?
No, just that we are going to roll right into the next audit, and our goal is to complete this in a timely manner. Scott is working. We've done a lot of work over the years to try and get ourselves to a point where the audits are more routine for us to prepare, and I think we're getting there. A lot of our issues revolve around the fact that we have a contract accountant, and Scott is stretched really thin with his other duties. So Brett is great at being able to prepare the audit side that he focuses on, and really our hang up has been more of the MD&A side, final reports and review of the final financials. So we're hoping to to not have the same issue next year.
Thank you. We need to accept the audit with a motion and a second. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So this is an action item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask questions about the audit? Julie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You're welcome always to make that motion and then open it up to discussion. Then public knows what they're making discussion on. I think this is an easy, clear acceptance of our audit. It's will do. Thank you, staff, for getting the needed information in to them. I'm just curious though, is this why we're advertising as a new finance manager? Is Jackson and Eklund going to step down from here? That could maybe be a discussion later in reports. You don't have to reply to that now. But I'm just curious if the two tie in together is all. And thank you for your service to our city. My family has always very much appreciated the services of Jackson and Eklund. And so thank you again.
Thank you. Any other comments or public input on this item? Okay, we'll come back to council for a possible first and second and a vote.
Mandy, how long does it take to put an audit together on average? Do you know?
Oh,
Maybe Brett can answer that.
Brett's probably better at answering that. He
Yeah.
does all the work behind the scenes while we're working every day. So, Brett, maybe you can answer that.
Start to finish, there's a lot of back and forth, so that's what really adds to the time of the audit. We can usually, if everything's prepared and we have a quick review, we could usually wrap it up in about a month or two.
Okay.
Start to finish, yeah. That's
Okay.
probably the average.
Okay. Thank you.
I like to say thanks, Brett, for all the breakdown in this one too. There's a lot of explanation there that's in there. I like that.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Christopher Edgar to accept the audit. Any further discussion from council? Any discussion from public? Back to council for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. All right. Item
Thank you,
7.
Brett.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Brett
Thank you.
and staff. We are on item 7, battery storage project information presentation by Redwood Coast Energy Authority. And in April of 2024, the city reclaimed control of the former Blue Lake Power Plant site. This property has been leased to Blue Lake Power for over 30 years. The property was reclaimed through a legal court proceeding, which essentially served as a tenant eviction. For the last several years, the city has been planning for the eventual reclamation of the property, as well as acknowledging that the city was most likely be left with a large-scale cleanup obligation. The city has been estimating the cleanup of the site to cost approximately $1 million and has been factoring this into ongoing development plans. The city has undergone a large-scale master planning exercise to identify development opportunities in the Powers Creek district, including the former plant site. The city received funding from EDA to conduct an economic analysis for the development of an RV park and campground, as well as other support economies. Through this process, the city identified the opportunity to repurpose the existing transformer and substation on the power plant site for a battery storage project and designed into the RV park and campground project the estimated footprint of this development. The city has been working with Redwood Coast Energy Authority for several years to evaluate future options for the power plant infrastructure and has signed MOU with RCEA to assist the city in attracting battery storage and other renewable projects to the site. The city has evaluated the installation of a large-scale solar project, and it was deemed infeasible due to the cost of the installation and the fact that the installation would not be large enough to be economically feasible. Recently, the city was approached by Power Transitions regarding a battery storage project known as BESS or BESS The company is proposing to purchase 6 acres of the power plant property to install a 2-phase BESS project. Phase 1 would include a 12 megawatt BESS, and the second phase would increase the project to 100 megawatts. Yeah. Yes. Under the proposal, Power Transitions would appraise the city's property, and using the value of the land and infrastructure would reduce the purchase price by the cost to fully clean up the property, including removal of the existing plant infrastructure, buildings, and fuel pile. The city would be paid the residual value of the land. Cleanup of the site will allow the city to move forward with recreation development in the district and will lift the current liability associated with the existing plant and the environmental impacts associated with the continued degradation of the site. The battery storage project is consistent with the zoning for the property, and issues related to noise can be mitigated to meet the noise standards established for the zone and the eventual rezoning of the site. Environmental issues related to BESS projects include the potential for fire. The proposed BESS project would meet all NFPA and building code standards, including container suppression systems. Power Transmissions is proposing a lithium iron phosphate project. This is a newer technology, and to date, this technology has recorded 0 fires associated with the systems. Options to address concerns related to the sale of city-owned property include deed restricting the property to limit future development, as well as granting the city the right of first refusal to purchase the property in the event that the company decides to sell. Future rezoning of the property could further protect the development potential of the property to ensure future development meets the objectives of the city. A BESS project will allow the city to repurpose the existing power infrastructure, will clean up the property for additional development, and will allow the city to participate in meeting renewable energy goals for our region and community. In order to provide information to the community regarding the project proposal, along with information regarding battery storage systems and their place in our regional renewable energy portfolio, Richard Engel from Redwood Coast Energy Authority will be in attendance to answer questions about battery storage, current and future energy procurement through RCEA, as well as the future of grid stabilization and energy resiliency. So we have from Redwood Coast Energy Authority, someone in attendance. Oh, hello. Hi, welcome.
Yeah, so I wanted to introduce Richard Engel. He is on RCA's procurement side, and he's been a longtime advocate, developer, and scientist and inventor of renewable opportunities in our community and the region. Formerly from the Schatz Energy Lab at Cal Poly Humboldt. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I thought it would be helpful as we continue to have this conversation to ask Richard to be able to come in and provide some information about best opportunities, where they're being utilized in our community, and kind of what they look like for the environmental kind of footprint of our region as we start to move forward. So he was very gracious in doing the same presentation at our planning commission meeting. We had a really good conversation and some dialogue, and so he was kind enough to be able to come back and present again to the council and to the community. And I know he's always open to questions, and he's a great resource for our community, and he's been a great resource for myself and city staff as we kind of look forward to what our options would be for the power plant site. So
Okay, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I laughed a little bit when I came in and picked up the agenda because when I was leaving the office this evening, one of my coworkers said, "Oh, good luck with the presentation in Blue Lake." And I said, "Actually, it's not a presentation. I'm just going to answer questions they might have." And then I walk in and pick up the agenda, and it says presentation by Redwood Coast Energy Authority. So I do not have a prepared presentation, but I'm happy to answer your questions. I can just give a little bit of background on why energy storage is of interest to RCEA. We have a goal that our board has set to to get 100% of the electricity that we provide to Humboldt County from renewable sources and to get as much of it as possible locally. And so we've been striving to do that and have, a pipeline of projects under development. I was really excited this past week to see that the solar panels have been delivered for the project on Sun Valley property on Foster Avenue, just outside of Arcata city limits. So that project is really moving ahead, and that's one that includes solar and storage. We really strive, and it's in our strategic plan, to have a diversified mix of renewable resources in our portfolio. And so, we hope that our portfolio in the future will be, a rich mix of, small hydro, biomass, solar, wind, geothermal, all of these, less environmentally harmful resources. Having said that, though, we find time and time again that solar projects tend to be the least expensive to develop and the easiest to get permitted among those different technology types. Um, so, that really kind of encourages us, nudges us towards doing solar where we can. But the big problem with solar, especially in California, is that there's really a glut of it on the grid now. California's kind of been almost overly successful at getting solar deployed so much that now in the middle of the day, a lot of that solar winds up getting denied access to the grid. It actually gets curtailed, these large utility scale solar projects across the state, and that's become an increasing problem over the last few years. The pretty obvious answer to it is energy storage, so you can store that excess energy that's coming from the sun in the middle of the day and put it onto the grid at other times of day when it's needed. Again, there's a diversity of technologies for storage out there, and some of them are really interesting technologies like, pumped hydro storage, where you can have reservoirs at two different levels and move water back and forth between them, or you can move big heavy weights up and down. And there's companies developing all of these technologies. But again, batteries tend to be the easiest to permit and the cheapest to deploy. So, just trying to be fiscally responsible and keep electric rates low for our ratepayers. Solar coupled with energy storage tends to be the most attractive solution. Although we hope to keep, diversifying into those other technologies as our finances permit and as can get permitted here in Humboldt County. Um, we do get some of our power from biomass, and historically there have been 3 biomass plants in the county. And when we first started our program in 2016, 2017, we got offers from all 3 of the plant operators to provide biomass power. We immediately went into contract with the Scotia plant, Humboldt Sawmill Company, which just had kind of the winning offer in terms of price and other terms that worked well for us. And their plant was fully up and operable. Shortly after that, we also got into contract with the Fairhaven plant on the Samoa Peninsula and took power from them for a couple of years. The plant eventually just stopped operating, and we let our contract with them lapse. To this day, we continue to get power from the Scotia plant. So that's been 8 years we've been doing that now. Um, and the Blue Lake plant, did give us an offer, but we just, didn't have very attractive terms from that. And there was a lot of community pushback on taking power from the Blue Lake plant, just kind of based on, their history with the community. So that just never happened. We've had our eye on these no longer operating biomass plants because in the utility industry, just interconnection capacity in itself is a really valuable asset. And we recognize that here were 2 locations in the county that had, more than 10 to 20 megawatts of interconnection capacity available at them. And that's so much faster and less expensive than starting a new greenfield power project and having to develop that interconnection from scratch. So just for years now, we've been thinking, well, we'd really like to find ways to get the Fairhaven and Blue Lake plants to be doing some kind of energy project, and battery storage seemed kind of the most obvious, most viable solution there. So much so that we actually even got into contract with Fairhaven under their current owner, who leased part of the property to an energy company that actually got started on developing a battery project. Unfortunately, they wound up deciding they had to terminate that contract with us because they just came up against some really unexpected uh, challenges, both in cost and timeline for getting the project online. So we're kind of back to square one with Fairhaven and looking for alternative ways to get a storage project developed there. Very interested in Blue Lake for the same reason. And we're actually hoping by the end of December to have a solicitation out that will be looking for local energy storage projects. We're aware of at least one other company that has their eye on a number of different other sites other than biomass plants around the county, and has been in touch with us about potentially doing projects as well. So we think we'll get a pretty strong response to the solicitation when it comes out, and we do hope to see something we can contract with for the Blue Lake biomass site. It seems to align with a lot of the city's interests, and we've had this memorandum of understanding with the city going back a couple of years now, with an eye towards making that happen. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
So this presentation we have in our packet is what you presented at the Planning Commission?
No, that was the one that was presented to you guys by Power Transitions.
Okay.
From 2 weeks ago.
Right,
Yeah,
but
we don't have any relationship with Power Transitions.
right. So what did you present at the Planning Commission?
I really didn't have a presentation.
Oh.
I kind of came in and did what I'm doing this evening.
Kind of the
which is just
same.
really
Oh.
came in to just prepared
Okay.
to answer questions, and so I had a pretty lively conversation with the Planning Commission, and
Okay.
just here to answer questions, really.
Okay, and then you mentioned something about the Sun Valley property that is now being developed for solar, and they have battery storage at that site too. Can you give me an idea of what the percentage of the storage is versus the
Right.
actual array of solar panels?
Sure. So it's a two-phase project, but the phases are pretty compressed together. So at this point, it looks like they're really going to get brought online at pretty much the same time or within a month or two of each other, and that should be by the first few months of next year. Because, like I say, the equipment's already on site. They've got all their permits and everything, so they're very close to being a live project. Um, it's going to be 7 megawatts of solar and 2.5 megawatts of battery capacity. Kind of the industry standard for battery energy storage projects is to size them so that they can discharge their power to the grid for 4 hours continuously per day. And so that project is sized so it can do that. So the 2.5 megawatts makes it similar in size to the existing battery storage system up at the airport that's part of our Redwood Coast Airport microgrid.
And what's the acreage of that? Do you know?
The whole
The Sun
site,
Valley?
it's the portion of the Sun Valley property that this is being built on is approximately 30 acres. Solar projects typically take 4 to 5 megawatt. I'm sorry, 4 to 5 acres for each megawatt of capacity. So the 7 megawatts times 4 plus acres, about 30 acres altogether.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
do
Question?
they have a 7 megawatt connection out there?
They're developing it. They actually just put in the poles for it. I just saw those freshly installed last week. So part of that falls to PG&E and part of it falls to the developer. So the developer has done their poles, and so they're basically waiting for PG&E to come through and do the utility side of
Okay.
the interconnection.
So there wasn't any sort of interconnection there before.
No, that's a new, built from scratch interconnection.
And do you happen to know how long it took them to get permitted through CAISO?
It's actually not through CAISO. They just had to
It's
work
not?
with PG&E because of the scale of it. So smaller scale projects like this and the airport microgrid just do a generation interconnection agreement with the local utility, in this case PG&E. If they're above a certain size, then they have to do a CAISO interconnection.
Oh. So do you know what that line is?
I don't know that it's a hard and fast line, but I think it's I think in the neighborhood of 20 megawatts. But I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't think it's just like a set megawatt amount. I think it partly depends on like the local distribution infrastructure.
And that's strictly for generation, so it wouldn't apply to us with those battery storage.
Yeah, the same things because you're basically doing the same thing as generation, which is pushing power into the grid when the batteries are discharging.
Oh, is that what Power Transitions was talking about when they're talking about the expedited permitting process? But I thought they were talking about it is with.
I don't know. I haven't really had any in-depth conversation with. In fact, I haven't talked to Power Transitions at all. My colleague Jocelyn Gwynn has been our point of contact with them. I know that they have told her that they think they have a pathway to this expedited interconnection. We're just a little bit skeptical about that because that was what the Fairhaven folks thought, and they came up against a brick wall with CAISO, and CAISO said, no, you have to go back and get in line and do a fresh interconnection because it's been more than 3 years since your plant's been online. And I know it's been much more than 3 years since Blue Lake was online. Just based on what we heard with Fair, I mean, we even wrote a letter to CAISO, endorsing the project and basically pleading the case on the developer's behalf to let them skip having to go back to square one on interconnection with Fairhaven, and CAISO was not open to that.
Interesting. So you mentioned that sometimes during the day, some of these generation projects, the big industrial size ones, so the power is actually not getting onto the grid. It's just being generated and going nowhere.
That does happen, during certain hours of the day, especially in the spring is like the most common time for that to happen because what happens is the days get longer and there's more sun available and the skies clear up and the heat hasn't really hit yet. So you don't have a lot of air conditioning load across the state. So the springtime is when the sun is, solar is generating a lot and the load hasn't gotten that big yet. So that's when you see the most of this curtailment, they call it. Um, so yeah, it's become each year you can look on the CAISO website and see they have like graphs you can look at that show how much that's been increasing year over year over year to where it's like, I don't know, hundreds of megawatts at the middle of the day that are getting denied access to the grid. Um, and so the good news is that storage has really accelerated coming onto the grid in the last couple of years. And I was talking to the Planning Commission about this last week, how the previous couple of summers before this last summer, we'd had these real close calls where we'd almost had, rotating outages and rolling blackouts because the grid was being strained to its limits. And this last summer was kind of escape because so much storage has come online now that it really was getting us through. And if you looked at graphs of which they'll show like these stacks that show, all the different resources that are online, and the battery part of it has gotten really, really big just in the last 2 years, enough so that the batteries were kind of the savior that got us through not having even really a threat of outages this last summer.
So the batteries are going to help with the curtailment and the rolling brownout type stuff.
For sure,
Or
yeah,
planned outages.
right. It lets us put more of that solar energy into the grid so it doesn't go to waste, and it reduces the risk of outages.
So one concern that was brought up at our special meeting 2 weeks ago was the potential noise of the battery storage systems. And I'm wondering if you or anyone from RCA has actually visited these new storage systems with the ion lithium phosphate batteries and and if you can speak at all to the potential noise concern. Or the presentation that we heard, it was noted that the new battery systems are not nearly as noisy, but I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all.
Right. I have not been to visit a lithium iron phosphate installation yet. The, biggest sized storage systems so far in the county are the one right here at the Rancheria and the one at the airport. So I've been in proximity to those when they're
Right.
operating, and they're, I think, quiet. So I don't really think there's much of a noise issue to be concerned about. And if the newer batteries are quieter than those old, kind of old school, if you will, lithium ion batteries, then that's probably good news.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Anyone from public would like to speak on this? Would staff like to make a presentation?
Yeah, I was just going to see, Richard, Would it be possible for council members or community members for us to arrange maybe like a site visit? I was thinking to the microgrid at the airport, just to kind of get an idea of what these battery packs look like, and just kind of just see how they're in operation throughout the community. Or I know that the Rancheria has a battery pack, St. Joe's has one, Mad River Hospital. Um, you guys have one at the airport, um, and I wasn't sure if that's an option.
Yeah, we do have site tours for different interested groups at the airport microgrid. I can talk to Dana Boudreau, my colleague, who's the project manager for the airport microgrid, and ask him to contact you.
Yeah, that would be great. And then
Okay.
maybe we could put something out to the community and see if people would be interested in taking a tour, just getting a little more familiar with these options.
Cool.
Yeah, great idea.
Happy to help with that.
Awesome.
And I can get back to you about the cutoff between which projects need CAISO permitting and which don't.
Right,
I should
that's
know that,
interesting.
but I don't actually know the exact cutoff.
So are there any theories about how increased battery storage may affect solar generation, or are we going to get to a place where there's enough and they're not going to allow more? You know, are they, I mean, it sounds like maybe we've already started to hit a place with solar generation where they don't want more.
You don't want more solar or don't want more?
Don't want more solar generation.
I think as long as we keep, well, the expectation is that electric demand is going to really skyrocket in the next couple of decades, partly because of things like,
Cars.
Bitcoin
warming.
and AI, data centers, that are going to be supposedly growing all over the place, but also just the goals that we have for electrification, uh, charging more electric vehicles, and then, getting gas furnaces replaced with heat pumps and all these things that RCA works on. So we're expecting, electric load is only going to increase over time. And so to keep up with that, we expect to keep deploying new generation, and there's no reason it can't be solar as long as we keep deploying enough other technologies that offset that big hump in the middle of the day. That can be load shifting, to get more electric load happening during the middle of the day when there's that excess electricity, and there's whole programs, these virtual power plants and things that are trying to shift load to the times of day when it's needed. It can be more batteries for energy storage. It can be all those other alternative storage technologies that I was talking about earlier. So I don't think that we're going to see like a hard limit to like, oh, no more solar on the grid. We just have to keep complementing it with other technology approaches that make it so it's not just a big bump in the middle of the day that nobody can use.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Were they out there in Samoa at the old SPI? Were they ever approached about putting battery storage out there? Because they have massive transition lines there.
Yes, you're right. I'm trying to remember if I ever heard a proposal.
Vegas owns that.
Yeah. I didn't know who currently owned it.
Pretty sure it's bought Vegas.
Right. Okay. I have not heard a proposal for a battery project there. I mean nothing serious. There was one of the developers who was briefly, partnering with RCEA on offshore wind. Was in town again recently and was really interested in potential sites around Humboldt Bay that could be used for energy storage. And I drove him around and showed him some sites, and we talked about the Sierra Pacific site as potentially being one of those, and he seemed really intrigued, but that was just sort of a looky loo kind of thing.
Well, it's still operational because that's where all our power comes from, is right there. Like that's where the big power transition comes, or super high tensile lines. So I was thinking, like, why couldn't it go something big going out there?
Coastal Commission.
Okay, there's
Julie,
a hand raised. Julie, would you like to speak to this matter?
Yeah, I'm scrambling in, you guys. Thank you, Christopher, for your last comments. Angela, Elise, thank you. I'm listening and I'm trying to get back on some stuff that's productive. I do appreciate having Elise on RCEA. I get to listen to the meetings. I've been promoting since the ozone that we are working on some power regenerative sources for our city within that zone. And it's too bad we can't, focus on the biomass again. I don't think there's been a lot of research done in it. As much as RCA wants to clamp down on Scotia, Anderson and Weaverville, they've got some plants that I think that, we missed out on this 3-year window. All this stuff is very strategically planned, and I'm not gonna Sid, I'm sorry my pup's barking. I'm just walking by and trying to get somewhere quiet to talk to you guys. I'm sorry. But I'm not going to go down this tangent. I'm just going to say that the climate action plan does not support what RCA can support for this county, period. We know that. Where is PG&E going to be resourcing this power from and storing it here? Okay, we're dealing with a bunch of cleanup that we need to get done. I do support, probably we're going to have to put the battery operation in there to get the cleanup done. We waited too long. We can't refab the buildings. We wasted a lot of funds and time and outsourcing. And I just really hope that we can clean this up in a quick way, that we're moving forward in a productive way. But the loss of time and funds, honestly, should be under scrutiny. And I know everybody else feels that way. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Richard? Thank you so much for coming out again to Blue Lake and giving your presentation. Thank you. All right, we're on item 8, City of Blue Lake Housing Element Presentation. The city planner, Gary Reese, will present the final draft of the City of Blue Lake Housing Element along with the accompanied CEQA analysis. On November 18th, 2024, city staff presented the final draft housing element to the Planning Commission, including the draft CEQA analysis, at which time the Planning Commission made a formal recommendation for adoption to the City Council. Staff is proposing to present the final drafts for the Council and Community's review and will be seeking adoption of the document at the Council meeting on December 10th, 2024. The process of updating the housing element has taken over 3 years and has included numerous community meetings, town hall presentations, as well as direct outreach to local resource agencies and individual meetings to address community member concerns. The city has received state funding to complete the update and adoption process, and the final adoption will achieve compliance with state mandates. So our city planner, Gary Reese, is here this evening. Thank you for being here.
I was going to do a combination of going through the staff report that I provided as well as doing a PowerPoint presentation. So if we could have a few moments to get the PowerPoint going, that would be great. Unacceptable.
Stretch break.
Yeah, one
Right? Stretch break. Yeah. Is that heat working?
It is.
It's on?
Barely.
Okay. Okay. I don't feel it back here. I think you have
Pretty
to
cold in here.
Yeah, I have a jacket I could put on. Mm. Okay, so this is
So wait for a little bit.
okay, we're ready to resume.
Right, looks like we're ready. Good
think
evening,
we're
council
ready.
members.
Proceed.
Thank you. For those who don't know, I'm Gary Reese. I work as a consulting city planner to the city of Blue Lake, and SHN, the firm I work for, provides both planning and engineering services to the city. Thank you for that introduction, Mayor Jones. The staff report that I provided, in addition to what you read, goes into a little more detail on what you summarized, and I'd like to kind of go over a little bit of that before I begin the PowerPoint presentation. So for those who aren't aware, state law requires cities in Humboldt County to update their general plan housing elements every 8 years. This is referred to as a housing element planning cycle. And the current cycle is for the 2019 to 2027 planning period, which is called also the sixth cycle. And as noted, the city did receive funding from 2 state funding sources to work on this. The first funds were received in 2021, so we have been working with the Planning Commission and others on this for, as you noted, about 3 years. There is a draft housing element update available on the city's website, as noted in the staff report. This draft has been reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They've determined that it's substantially compliant with state housing law and instructed us to move forward with the adoption process. As noted in the letter that I provided in the packet, they've also instructed the city that after adoption, there's an implementation program that needs to happen before they will actually certify the element. And so that's detailed in the letter that they provided. So after we got that letter from HCD, we began moving forward with the process and worked on a CEQA document, a document of the California Environmental Quality Act, to analyze the potential environmental impacts of adopting the housing element update. And if you've had a chance to look at it, it's concluded in that draft initial study, it's found that the housing element update would not have a significant effect on the environment. And because of that, staff is recommending that a determination of negative declaration would be the appropriate CEQA determination for adoption of the housing element update. So since we've gotten HCD review on the housing element update, we've completed and circulated a CEQA document. The Planning Commission was ready to make a recommendation, and as you noted, did so at their November 18th meeting. They were recommending that the housing element update draft be adopted by the City Council, as well as the recommended CEQA negative declaration. And so also, as you noted, we're proposing that a public hearing be held by the City Council at their special meeting on December 10th to consider adoption of the housing element update and its CEQA document. So in anticipation of the meeting, we wanted to basically put this on the agenda tonight to provide council members and the public an opportunity to review the draft housing element update, to provide public comment, and to ask questions of staff. So yeah, that's basically it for the staff report that I provided. Why don't we go into the PowerPoint presentation? So this presentation kind of gives some background on the housing element update process, talks about what the housing element update proposes, and then also discusses a little bit about CEQA and the difference between a plan level versus project level review, which was a comment that came up several times before the Planning Commission. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this right here is the logo for the California Department of Housing and Community Development. This is the primary agency whose job is to implement state housing law and to enforce state housing law. They actually have a housing accountability unit whose job is to enforce housing law if jurisdictions aren't following it. Next slide. So then we also have the Humboldt County Association of Governments. So this is the local joint powers authority or agency that is composed of all the local jurisdictions. And it's their job as part of the housing element update process to figure out what the regional housing need is and work with HCD and the local jurisdictions to assign it to the various cities in the county. So they're the ones who essentially put out the report that provides what they call the regional housing needs allocation. Next slide, please. So before getting to the sixth cycle housing element update, I'd like to give a little bit of history about the city compliance with the requirement to update the housing element every planning cycle. And so this slide here shows you the cover of the
housing element update that was prepared for the last cycle or the fifth cycle. And as it notes here, in 1986 was the first time that the city adopted housing. And then in 1992 was the first time the city got certified. And then in 2004, the city also got certified, but that was the last time. So it's been 20 years. And that is problematic nowadays because they have become more punitive for jurisdictions that haven't done this. So in 2009, the city adopted its housing element, but it wasn't able to achieve certification from the state because there were certain things that the city wasn't willing to do, that the city council wasn't willing to do. So in 2015, we also did a draft. It was reviewed by HCD, and we got a number of comments from them, but the city wasn't able to achieve compliance at that time either. Could I get the next slide, please? So I've been asked this question a number of times over the years. What are the consequences of non-compliance with state housing law? And one of the biggest ones is the city could be sued. So that could be by the state, or that could be by housing advocacy groups. The city has received Public Records Act requests from groups like YIMBY Law, folks like that, which has been concerning, but they've never followed through with anything. They've simply just done their due diligence to see what the city has done compliance-wise. Another consequence is the city could be denied grant funding, which is problematic for a small city like Blue Lake, who relies very heavily on grant funding from the state. Another consequence is the state could take away local control. So some of us may have seen this with ADU law, where essentially there's no planning review at all for ADUs going in. It's become very easy. There's also other laws like the Housing Accountability Act, which really limits the type of findings a community can make for, say, denying an affordable housing project. So these consequences have only got more severe over time. They kind of ramped up enforcement in the fifth cycle, and they've also done so in the sixth cycle. So there have been lawsuits against jurisdictions for not achieving compliance on their housing elements. There have been lawsuits against jurisdictions for improperly denying housing projects. Next slide, please. So this here is the cover, as you may have seen, of our sixth cycle housing element update. Has a kind of a cool picture of the mural in town. Yeah. Could you go to the next slide, please? This here is the cover of our current regional housing needs assessment for the 2019 to 2027 period. As I noted before, this is prepared by HCOG in consultation and coordination with local jurisdictions and the Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide, please. So right here is a table that shows the city's allocation for the sixth cycle. And so as you can see, they're allocated units by different income levels, and the number was 23. Next slide, please. So it's important to note, I was noting that the state has become more punitive in how they're dealing with non-compliance. So what you'll see in this table here is the city has been told they have to plan for both the fifth cycle and the sixth cycle RENA allocation because it didn't have a compliant or certified fifth cycle housing element. So we were allocated 11 units in the fifth cycle, and we had to add that to the 23 units in the sixth cycle for a total of 34. And that's what you'll see in this draft housing element update is what we're planning for here, is 34 units. Next slide, please. So here, this is an important slide just to look at the residential development potential in the city and to consider what the city had planned for in past housing element planning cycles versus what they're planning for today. So the picture on the left is the west side of town, an area that's zoned planned development residential. In the third, fourth, and fifth cycles, those were the primary sites the city pointed to say, this is where we can meet our RENA allocation. I think, this is where the 11 units could go in the fifth cycle, for example, is what we were saying. The state's been a little skeptical of these sites being used over and over. One, because they really haven't been developed. I think we have the Eliason project, but other than that, there hasn't been much movement on these sites. And when you try and reuse sites over and over in subsequent housing element updates, they basically say you guys need to come up with better sites. These aren't being developed, and in these cases, as you can see just from this picture, you've got environmental constraints there, like large wetland areas, drainages, things like that, which limit development potential. So, in their comments on the fifth cycle draft element that we prepared, they really were saying you guys need to plan better for where you're going to put residential development. You've been trying to regurgitate these sites over and over, and nothing has happened on them. So, that's part of what led into the Powers Creek District planning process is we were looking for sites that had better access, fewer environmental constraints, were of sufficient size to allow, residential development, multifamily development, things like that. So rezoning the former business park to opportunity as part of the Powers Creek District planning really opened up some sites to have additional residential development potential and truly demonstrate that we had adequate sites in the city to meet our RENA allocation. And so that's what you'll find when you review this six cycle element is these sites are far more suited for providing the full range of housing. Not just single family, which Blue Lake mostly has, but also the multifamily, which can fall into the lower or very low income categories. Because the state is requiring that you not just plan for single family or above moderate and moderate, you also have to plan for that lower and very low. And typically that happens on larger sites that allow higher densities. Next slide, please. So this here is an important figure that shows you the vacant sites we've identified in the six cycle elements. You'll see there is some vacant sites out South Railroad Avenue on the west side of the city. You've got those three sites I just showed in the Powers Creek District that are zoned opportunity. You got a few mixed use zone sites near the downtown, and otherwise you have a couple vacant sites that are zoned for single family residential. So that's what we're identifying as the vacant sites where housing can happen and we can meet our RENA numbers. Next slide, please. So here is actually a draft of the City of Blue Lake's current zoning map. This is something that was just produced recently and first presented to the Planning Commission at their last meeting. What this shows is all of the rezoning that happened as part of the Powers Creek District planning. So it shows the opportunity zone amongst all the other current zones in the city. This isn't a map that's been available until recently. Still in draft form, so we're not handing it out and things like that, but I wanted to present it to both the Planning Commission and the City Council to show, what zoning changes happened there. So you can see in the red, on Gary Johnson's property, as well as some of the city-owned property and other private property, you've got the O there for opportunity. And then you also have some green zoning there that's zone X, which is essentially the Levee Trail and the Creek Corridor. Those were previously zoned light industrial and industrial. Not great planning, that so we tried to clean that up as part of that rezoning effort. So we'll be working on this, and this will be available on the city's website, and it's kind of part of that general plan modernization that I presented on at a past meeting this year. Next slide, please. So this right here is an analysis that we have to do in the housing element, where we have to say, here's our RENA allocation, here's our capacity for ADUs and junior ADUs, here's the capacity we have on vacant sites, and then is there a surplus? Do we have sites that can not only meet our RENA, but also accommodate additional residential development? And what you'll see here is we have a surplus really in those sites in the Powers Creek District for the low and very low income categories. We're showing that we have a surplus of 42 units potentially there. Then we're also showing that we have a surplus of 15 units in the moderate income category. So that would come from some of the sites on the west side of the city that are larger. And then above moderate, we have a small surplus. And really above moderate, you're going to see those on standard city lots that are zoned for R1. That's what's happened in recent years. Folks, any vacant lot you have in Blue Lake is going to be developed probably with a nice home. And so the building permits that we've seen, the developments we've seen on those lots definitely fall in the above moderate category. But above moderate is usually one of the harder ones to plan for. Um, you can't guarantee that people are going to develop those type of units, so folks don't often meet that one. Next slide, please. So this slide here, as well as the staff report I provided, provides a summary of the revisions to the city's zoning code that is proposed by the housing element update. So one of the key things that the update does is it does what I just showed you. It identifies vacant sites where the housing can be built. It also, if needed, proposes revisions to the zoning code. And the city needs these revisions for a variety of reasons. Some of the biggest are inconsistency with state housing law. So these are things that the city has to do, otherwise it could not achieve compliance with the state housing. So starting with the first one, ensuring consistency with current state law. We've got all sorts of, if you look at program HI1 in the housing element update, we've got a number of sections of the zoning code that are outdated by many years. We can't actually implement them as written. We as staff have to know what the current state law is and make sure that we're actually implementing that. So these are really cleanup amendments. There's things like our ADU regulations are not consistent with state law. Our definition of family, how we treat transitional supportive housing, I could go on and on. Look at program HI1. So those are really cleanup amendments that we have to do. The next one is really been one of the big sticking points for the city for the last 20 years with the state. Why we haven't gotten certified housing elements since 2004, because the city's been unwilling to do by right zoning for apartments or multifamily. And essentially, if you look at the zoning map that's in the presentation, look at the PDR zone on the west side of the city. That's the one we went back and forth with the state on. They essentially said you should upzone this to allow multifamily by right. That's what you need to do to achieve compliance. And past city councils basically said, no, we don't want an entire zone that allows by right or just a building permit for apartments or multifamily. So what you'll see is we're this time proposing a more creative approach where we would be creating a multifamily combining zone that would be applied to individual properties, not an entire zone, just individual properties on top of the base zoning district. So you still follow all the rules of the base zoning district, but you would be allowed to do 16 units per acre by right. And I'll describe that a little bit more. I've got some slides that show an example of how that could happen. So also a number of the standards, development standards in the residential zones were written to, it looks like, to make multifamily development difficult. And the state called that out. They asked us to analyze, are these barriers to the development of multifamily housing? And we couldn't really say no, because they are. There were limitations on height and setbacks and things that were different than other zones. So essentially they were asking, make this consistent so you're not inhibiting apartments and multifamily housing. Also then, we have to comply with the requirements in government code for objective design standards. We have a site plan approval process that has what are called principles to be followed, and this process is akin to design review. And these principles are subjective. They say things like, is this compatible with the neighborhood or the character of surrounding development? The problem with that is it basically creates subjectivity for the decision makers to decide, in essence, in their opinion, is it consistent with the community? Things like that. What the state wants is objective standards that are clear, concise, and developers and the public understand what they have to do. They wouldn't have to go to a public hearing for a conditional use permit and have no idea whether their project's going to get approved or not. And so that's really the point of requiring objective design standards. So we're going to have to take those principles to be followed and make them objective so we're not allowing discretion to be part of that review process. The last one, we have some design guidelines that the city has adopted in the past, but they are just guidelines. And we were advised by past city attorneys that if somebody didn't want to follow these, they're really not legally enforceable. The problem is that some of our zoning code references these guidelines and it confuses people. They're like, well, it sounds like they're required. It says in the code that these should be followed. So the state's essentially asking that we revise it to make it clear that they're advisory, they're encouraged, they're not required. So those are the primary revisions that the current housing element update is proposing to the city zoning code to achieve compliance with state housing law. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk a little more about the multifamily combining zone. This is one that's generated a lot of interest for folks that have been following this process. This is implementation program HI 14. This is the program the state is telling us we have to implement before they will certify this housing element. And so what that means is we have to create this combining zone as a new tool, a new zoning tool in the city's code. And the way it would be used once created is it would be applied to individual properties. So for example, you have the Calgon Carbon property there. It's about a 2-acre property. If this were applied to that property by right, you potentially could do up to 32 residential units. So if this were applied, down the road, once it's created in a later housing element planning cycle, we potentially could show that we're absolutely planning for our lower income RENA just by that action, by applying that to a single property. Right now, what they're asking is for us to apply that to a site that can allow at least 11 units, because that's our carryover from the 5th cycle. So if you have a carryover nowadays from a prior cycle, they want you to create by right zoning for those sites specifically. Well, we didn't actually call out specific sites in the 5th cycle. We just said we have these zones, and this is the amount of residential units that can happen in those zones. So we've talked with them about, well, we have the Powers Creek district. This area has been rezoned for the opportunity zone. And we think that's the most appropriate location to apply this, especially because if you look at the bottom bullet, must be applied to sites 1 acre larger to meet state requirements. There are not that many sites like that in the city. There's maybe some down South Railroad, but as I described before, they're less suitable. So it really would be the Powers Creek district where this would best be applied. Although, it will say in there that potentially could be applied to the R3, MU, PDR, and O-based zoning districts. It really looks most suitable for the opportunity zone in the Powers Creek district. And understand if this was applied, all the development standards of the opportunity zone would still apply, except you would be able to do a density of 16 units per acre by right. The opportunity zone actually, the density allows 17.4 units per acre. So this wouldn't be any denser than what's already allowed in these districts, but it would allow it by right. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So I've got the zoning map here just again to kind of show, where's the PDR? It's on the west side of the city primarily. You have your mixed use kind of around the downtown. You have your opportunity in the Powers Creek district. And you have your R3 just off the downtown and down Railroad. So those are potential sites that currently have that zoning where this combining zone could be applied. But as I noted, we really see the Powers Creek district as the appropriate location for this. Next slide, please. So that's kind of a summary and overview of what's proposed by the Housing Element Update. Next, I'd like to talk about the CEQA process. And as I noted before, the recommendation to the council from the Planning Commission and staff is that the appropriate determination is a CEQA negative declaration. We've got a lot of comments from folks saying, well, why isn't there mitigation included? Why isn't this a mitigated negative declaration? The initial study acknowledges that there's potential impacts from future residential development. And as I'll describe in here, there may be from future residential development, but there isn't from just simply adopting the housing element itself. So here, just kind of breaking down a plan level versus project level analysis under CEQA. Plan level is like what we're doing with the housing element update. It analyzes potential environmental impacts of the implementation of goals, policies, and programs in the plan area. So those implementation programs in the housing element update, that's what the CEQA document is analyzing. Many of them have, well, pretty much all of them have no potential for a physical environmental impact to the environment. It's not making housing happen. It's just simply saying things should be done, such as zoning code amendments. But when those amendments go to happen, they themselves would be subject to CEQA. So you would get more specific in your analysis as you go through the process. By contrast, project level, where you might have mitigation measures, that's analyzing the site-specific environmental impacts of a project. You know much more about that project at that time and have the ability to analyze its environmental impacts. And I have a few slides that get into a little more detail on that. Okay, next slide. So again, plan level, just showing the picture of the whole city here, because that's really what we're focusing on in the housing element update. So we're analyzing implementation programs HI1 through HI23. That's what this CEQA analysis does for the housing element update. And a negative declaration really is often the most common CEQA determination for individual general plan element updates, such as a housing element update. For example, most local jurisdictions adopted a negative declaration for their housing element updates. Next slide. And this is some language out of the CEQA document that is provided before each resource topic that's analyzed in that initial study. And I think it's a really important statement that helps folks to understand what the housing element update does. And it states the housing element update is a policy document that does not result in physical changes to the environment, but encourages the provision of housing in areas of the city that are already designated and zoned to allow residential development. While policies could require amendments to the zoning code or result in actions of the city that could cause a physical change, the policies would not result in specific physical changes to the environment. Additionally, any amendments to the zoning code would be subject to project-specific environmental review pursuant to CEQA. So that really explains, what this CEQA analysis is doing for something like a housing element update. Next slide, please. What? No. Can I? Yeah. Can I finish the presentation and maybe ask questions? Thank you. So as far as project level, we've got a picture here of the current site design for the Denko project. So this is what was submitted by their new architect that they're working with. As some may know, the site has moved to the east to accommodate the bike park. And so in a case like this, where you've got a specific development proposal, you know exactly what they're proposing, how big it is, how tall it is, all the other improvements associated with it, utility connections. That's something that allows you to do a project-specific analysis. And when you do that, you're often requiring the preparation of technical studies. It could be a biological report, a cultural report, a traffic study, geotechnical investigation, things of that nature. And those reports will often recommend mitigation measures, which then leads to the CEQA determination for a project being a mitigated negative declaration. And so for projects that can't found to be exempt either categorically or statutorily under CEQA, it's typically a mitigated negative declaration. And that is the determination that's anticipated for the Danko project based on the technical studies that they've had done. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation as far as what's in the staff report and that PowerPoint presentation. If I could potentially answer that clarifying question before you guys deliberate. What was the
Are there any questions from council about this?
I had lots of
Yeah,
questions
I got
as
two
you
of
were
them.
going through. But I kind of feel like as you go through, I kind of lose track of what it was I wanted to ask you. So could you talk a little bit more about why the 2004 and then 1992 housing elements were not certified?
I believe 92 and 2004 were certified.
Oh wait, sorry. You say yeah, they are certified. 09.
Sure, absolutely. The by right requirement was one of the primary reasons that certification couldn't be achieved at that time. So in 2009, one of the main comments that came back from HCD is, we really need you guys to choose a zone where you allow multifamily housing by right. And the city council at the time said, no, we don't want to do that. We want multifamily housing of 5 or more units at that time, and in some cases, any multifamily housing to require a conditional use permit. And the state's opinion of that is that's a barrier to development multifamily housing. It creates enough uncertainty in the process that developers may not want to develop in your community. And so that's the state philosophy on by right zoning. And that was the reason that both 2009 and 2015 were not going to be certified. As far as adoption, though, in 2015, adoption didn't even happen. And that was a choice of the council. We got a Strategic Growth Council grant to do that update in 2015. And we used the grant to create the draft. It got reviewed by HCD, and then it was, the city needed to take it through the adoption process. And the council at the time said, we don't have the resources to do this, so don't do any more work on this. So
Because we used up the grant and there was no more money?
basically, yeah.
Okay.
So that was their decision. There was a number of other things that could have moved forward that were done through that grant, and they basically asked staff to provide a list of the most important high priority items that could be moved forward, and that's what moved forward. Everything else didn't happen.
Okay.
But part of the reason that didn't happen was because the state wasn't as punitive, I hate to use that word, about what we should be doing, though. There was more leeway back then.
Yeah,
And
they were
more
still allowing.
recently now they're saying, no, it's not what
Yeah.
you want, it's what you have to do, more or less.
Yeah, the state created the Housing Accountability Unit, which
Right.
then was tasked with being like, an enforcement arm of HCD. So there actually is an individual that lives here locally that works remotely for HCD that's helped to educate us local planners about what that all means. And they have a lot of technical advisory documents that are available on their website that kind of lays out the enforcement actions they've taken against various jurisdictions in the state. So you're absolutely correct. Enforcement was not as serious back then.
Right. And there is actually a city in the Bay Area, I think, who didn't comply, and they did take over their planning department.
So that's what that actually was leading into the question that I was going to ask. I wanted to make sure I understood the consequences of non-compliance when I wrote it down. So on number 3, so I understand number 2, right? The city could be denied grant funding, and which is considerably problematic for Blue Lake.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of that's a hill that we don't need to die on for certain. But on number 3, where it said the state could take away local control, I wrote down what I understood was that, in essence, the state could potentially come in and put up housing elements without city control. Is that the way I understood it, or is that not correct?
I personally haven't seen that happen, but it
Okay.
doesn't mean it hasn't. There are ways the state can take away local control under laws like the Housing Accountability Act. Um, if you weren't willing to achieve compliance with your housing element update, they in essence would say, fine, then, there's certain actions the state can take to allow projects to happen, even if the community doesn't want them to, for example. Like if the planning commission or council would deny them, they sometimes will take away that ability, or there's very narrow findings in which they can do so.
Okay.
I heard that they'll just rezone and make you sell property and stuff like that.
I've seen that happen through lawsuits in Shasta County, where the county was forced to upzone, rezone to allow housing to achieve compliance with state housing law. So yeah, there's a variety of ways people are forced to achieve compliance.
Okay. Thanks.
So, and compliance essentially is through zoning. In other words, if it's zoned to allow it, we're in compliance, whether it's built
Compliance,
or not.
yeah, compliance would be providing adequate sites with reasonable development standards that doesn't inhibit housing for all. So many jurisdictions, such as Blue Lake, do have rules that inhibit multifamily housing by design. It's not usually an issue. You're inhibiting, above moderate or moderate. I mean, that's not usually an issue. It's you're inhibiting multifamily or affordable housing, that type of thing. Some of the changes we have to make to the code are to lower the barriers to being able to do multifamily housing in Blue Lake.
So essentially, you're identifying all the vacant buildable properties in town and applying new zoning.
Well, you're identifying them, determining whether they can meet your RENA and the different income levels. And then you're also analyzing your rules for the second part of it to determine whether you have reasonable development standards.
Okay, let me ask it. So say there's a quarter-acre lot somewhere that's vacant, and there are no environmental barriers to building there. Can somebody go in and put a fourplex on it, or I mean, put some multifamily? I mean, like, no matter where it is in town, is that by right stipulation going to apply to that lot?
We do have zones that allow up to 4 units by right. The mixed use zone does, the opportunity zone does. We already have that. Um, I don't think the state considers fourplexes to be sufficient, dense enough or large enough to accommodate affordable housing units, affordable to lower income individuals. That's where the higher densities and the larger site requirements come in.
So even though there's the by right thing and there's all these changes that are going to affect a lot of properties, you're saying that the higher density stuff is not likely to happen on the smaller
Well,
ones?
let's be clear. There's no zoning actions proposed that's going to change the density um, on any of these sites. They would essentially all we're doing is saying, here's the vacant sites, here's the zoning, we can accommodate our arena on it. That's what we're saying. The by right is the state saying, well, you require a CUP for 5 or more units on some of these. You need to change that rule. You need to allow by right either in a zone or through something like a combining zone. But that doesn't change the density per se, such as if it were applied in the opportunity zone. That by right zoning allowance would still be less than the current density, residential density allowed in the opportunity zone.
Okay.
Gary, can you just clarify? I think part of the question is that we're not changing a lot of the existing zoning. There's already existing zoning for every
Yeah.
parcel in Blue Lake. So
Yeah.
this isn't creating a combining or overlay for all of the parcels to allow by right. So there's already, when you talk about R3, R1, R2s, O,
Yeah.
those are already specific designations. So R3 is more of our multifamily density that's allowed, like Vance Lake, where we
Sure.
have apartment buildings and things. So can you just clarify that a
Yeah, and I
bit?
think it'd be helpful to point at the map. So as Mandy was noting, I mean, there's a variety of zoning in the city that currently exists. We're not proposing to change any of that. Your R3 is the highest density zone. It's pretty much mostly built out. Your R2 is kind of a duplex or essentially allows duplexes by right. Your mixed use zone with a use permit would allow 5 or more units. Opportunity zone with a use permit would allow 5 or more units. So we're not actually proposing any actions that would change these zones. What we're proposing is to create a combining zone. And what that is it's a zoning tool that gets placed on top of individual properties to allow something different than the base zoning district. In this case, it would simply be using the case of Calgon Carbon to apply it on there to allow by right residential development. It's 16 units per acre. Every other part of that opportunity zone would still apply except that one part related to density and the need to get a use permit or not get a use permit.
That includes setback.
Sure, all the other development standards would apply. So yeah, we're not looking at changing the zones. Our zoning is adequate. It's just the by right requirements. And some of the development standards, which do need to be amended. But the opportunity zone is not one other than density that we're proposing to change development standards. So is there a more specific information you were looking for in regards
So
to?
the by right overlay is going on specific properties that you've identified.
Yeah, we haven't actually determined which ones. I just use Calgon Carbon as an example, but we need to find a property that accommodated at least 11 units. That's the carryover from the fifth cycle. And that's a more surgical or focused approach than what the state asked us to do over the past 20 years, which is take one of your zones, such as PDR, and allow multifamily by right. Well, the concern of past councils and commissions is that means every property in the city zone PDR allows by right apartments. That was not a step the city was willing to take. So we chose something like a combining zone, which is a more focused approach. We have this tool. We can apply it to an individual property when we need to demonstrate that we have by right zoning to accommodate the low income RENA. That's really what it's meant to do.
So you essentially have to keep applying it to different properties till you run out of properties?
Going forward for future housing element planning cycles, that could happen, yeah. And then at that point, the state says, okay, well, you've run out of land, annex. Okay, well, if you can't annex, then upzone. So we'll see what happens in the future. But at
And
this
if
time,
nobody builds anything in all these years?
as long as you have adequate sites and you have reasonable development standards, that's all you're asked to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the current 23 unit is being met by the Danco, but you want to identify a second.
Only parts of it. If they're going to do mostly affordable housing, then that goes to the lower income RENA. That doesn't necessarily mean above moderate or moderate. You still have to see that happen
Well,
as
you
well.
just keep identifying, you keep talking about the 11 carryover units.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
about the 23 current units?
So the 23 units, as you see, we've identified where they could occur on the vacant sites in the city. That's the whole analysis that happens in the housing element update. So we're showing all 34 and where they can be accommodated. There was a table earlier that showed here's your arena, here's your ADU capacity, here's your sites, and there's actually a surplus.
Okay.
You know, we can
Well, I
accommodate
just didn't understand why you kept going back to the 11 carryover.
because that's what has resulted in the need for the combining zone. We have that carryover and we have to plan for by right zoning to accommodate that carryover.
We have to essentially implement one of the programs.
We have to
The
implement,
state's requiring that.
yeah.
So
We,
we can't just, it's not enough just to say it. We have to actually implement one of the programs.
which is program HI 14 related to the multifamily combining zone. So we need to find a site in the city that can accommodate those 11 units and place the multifamily combining zone on there so that by right is allowed for, you know, apartments on that site. That's what they're asking before they'll certify this 6 cycle housing element.
Gary, can you distinguish by right versus like what are
Yeah.
the process? So because it doesn't mean that a developer can just come in and develop a parcel without any process. There's still zoning requirements. So you have your height restriction, your setback requirements, your infrastructure, all of that, and your CEQA analysis. All of that has to be complied with. But there's the difference is the use permit process.
Yeah, so when you get a use permit, obviously you have to pay fees, put in an application, a public hearing is held, and it goes before the planning commission for a decision. The public can attend, make comments, all of that. When it's by right, you're applying for a building permit. And through that process, it's reviewed by planning, for example, to make sure it meets all the development standards, it's an allowable use in the zone, all of that stuff. Also, if staff were to see that the site has environmental constraints, like let's say there's a big wetland in the middle of the site, then typically you're going to refer that to regulatory agencies such as CDFW, the Army Corps, the Water Board, and hear what comments they have. And you know, they're going to respond and say, well, you know, there's these laws that protect that wetland. Maybe they require setbacks, you know, things like that. So if there are environmental constraints or issues that need to be addressed by other entities, and that would be referred out to them. And then the other city departments, obviously, city engineering, public works, review it for infrastructure improvements, access, things like that. So although all you need is a building permit, there's still a whole process associated with reviewing it for compliance with local, state, and federal regulations.
Okay.
But it does make it easier if it's by right. You don't have to go to the
You
planning
don't have to
commission
go
and
to
get
a
a use
public
permit.
hearing before the
Yeah.
planning commission,
Right.
pay those fees, yeah, deal with that uncertainty.
Has the state seen how we're allowing auxiliary dwelling units to be built in people's backyards, and does that go towards our favor in any way? Because
Oh,
that has happened
absolutely.
in
Absolutely.
a few yards
So
in
there
town.
is a requirement to do an annual progress report to look at implementation of your housing element. It gets submitted, I believe, every April. And so we have to go through the building permit records that can include ADUs or any other types of housing units, and we have to report to the state, you know, what permits are being issued for what and what income categories we believe they fall in. We also have to look at our programs in our adopted housing element update and say whether we've achieved these things or where are we in implementing them, that type of thing. So there's an ongoing reporting process to the state for implementation of housing elements and the issuance of building permits.
Other questions before I open it up to the public? Okay, any public comments or questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to give Gary a microphone. You need to give Gary a microphone too.
Gary, thank you. That was informative and very efficient. You have a very high rate. Very good. So, two quick questions. One would be, I think, pretty simply addressed, and that is on the applying the combining zone. We have sections called likely developable, questionable developable, and then unlikely. if you could elaborate, like what's the determinants for each of those categories? And then the second question would be, as we look at the different properties, I know oh, wow, 16 units per acre. But let's shrink it down. And for a standard residential lot that may not be developed on, it's about 60 by 100, more or less. How many multifamily units could be on that? Just two? Like, like if you had a home and an ADU, or could they develop it into 6 individual units? So when we apply the consideration of maximizing on a certain property and a residential one, and also in the mixed use, number of units on a small size and height on a small size. Thank you so much.
Would you
Did
like
you
me to
want to go
respond to
ahead?
those in
Yeah,
real
why don't you
time?
go
Just
ahead and
because I
answer?
may, yeah, may not remember all that.
Yeah.
Is it possible we could bring the presentation up and go back to the slides so I can explain that to everybody? And we'd be looking for the slide that showed the vacant sites inventory. So yeah, those are good questions. Thank you for that. Um, so back to our vacant sites inventory map, as Kat was noting, likely developable, questionably developable, likely not developable, or categories we're showing on this map. So most of the sites are shown as likely developable. That means they have decent access, they don't have a lot of environmental constraints, and it's likely they could be developed at the density and with the units that we're saying it could in the site inventory in the housing element update. Now, when you get to questionably developable, there's only one. It's right here off of Applewood Lane. It's very small. It might be 3,000 square feet or something like that. And just because of its very small size and all the development standards that apply there, they may need variances. Who knows? So we called that one questionably developable. As far as likely not developable, there's a number of vacant sites in the city that are technically vacant, but they might be a big wetland, or they might be a slope like this, or things of that nature. It might be part of the creek. So we called those likely not developable. But the state wants you to go through and give your assessment of how developable are these sites. And when you see the table that goes along with this map, it talks about some of the environmental constraints per site. And we don't always assume the max development potential can happen. That actually is only assumed on a single family lot where you can get one unit, because to assume anything less would be no development. That'd be weird. So on the other ones, like here in the Powers Creek district, it's anywhere from 40 to 60% of the actual development potential is assumed to be the realistic development potential. So the state doesn't allow you to say, oh yeah, 100% this could be developed to the maximum density allowed by the zoning. As far as your question, it sounded like you were asking about a single family lot R1 zoning and maximum development potential.
For an R1 and
Okay, so mixed use is easy. That just whatever the density is. It's 1 unit per 2,500 square feet. So you can have 1 unit per 2,500 square feet. So that one's simple. Single family lots are interesting because of ADU laws. You technically could have up to 4 units, but not the way you think. It's not going to be 4 individual units detached from each other. It's going to need to be some combination. It could be like a single family residence that has a junior accessory dwelling unit in it, a converted bedroom. And then the garage, which is attached, also got converted to an attached ADU. And then with that, you could have a detached ADU. When you add it all together, it's technically 4 units. But really, it's a single family residence, a kind of a complex of 3 units and a detached ADU. So that's kind of the max development potential. We do have the urban lot split law, SB 9, that allows you to cut a 6,000 or 5,000 square foot lot in half. Doesn't apply in Blue Lake. Many people have inquired about that. Blue Lake's not defined as an urbanized area or urban cluster. Those are the areas in which SB 9 applies. So to answer it, single family, potentially up to 4 units.
even on a 6,000 square foot.
Yeah.
Up to
Yeah.
house, attached garage converted to ADU, and secondary ADU.
Detached ADU as well.
Well, no, that wasn't it. So we have garage converted, detached ADU,
Yeah, basically just think of one house where you have an attached ADU to the house, you have a junior ADU, which can be no more than 500 square feet, and then you have your detached. So you basically have one structure that kind of has 3 units in it, and you have a detached ADU. That's one of the ways you can get to 4 units on a single family property.
So
In the R1 zone, it's 35 feet, and actually in the mixed use zone, it's also 35 feet. For comparison, the retail commercial zone, the downtown, 45 feet. The city's multifamily R3 zone, 45 feet. The prior zoning in the Powers Creek district, light industrial, 60 feet, and heavy industrial, 100 feet. So height-wise, the rezoning to opportunity lowered the height from 60 to 100 down to 45.
so that R1 4 unit scenario that you described does that satisfy our arena allocation in any way, shape, or form?
It could for ADUs. Now we projected, I don't know, something like 10 ADUs or something like that in a draft of this housing element update. In HCD's review, they said, I'm sorry, you guys have had like one ADU in 5 years. Where do you get off saying you're going to have 10 in a couple of years? Okay, fine. We put the number as 4, I think, in the current draft. And we probably have gotten 2 already. So we're well on our way to meeting the 4. But yes, those that we were just describing, those additional units on a single family property would count towards the ADUs we projected.
But not a low income or very low income
Maybe.
arena?
It depends. You have to like really actually look at what that unit's going for.
Right.
We'll do our research. We'll talk to local realtors. We'll try and figure out, even if we can talk to the property owner, what are you charging? And then we can figure out where it falls in the income categories based on that. These
So-
ADUs don't typically go for cheap in Blue
Right.
Lake. They often end up being moderate, possibly even above moderate, depending on how much they spend on it.
So, and does whether or not the owner accept a Section 8 subsidy have any effect on whether or not that satisfies these lower income?
Well, you have a
requirements?
difference between housing choice vouchers and project-based vouchers. Um, with a project-based voucher, you often have an agreement where it'll stay affordable for a certain period of time. That's something you can count towards the RENA. A housing choice voucher is something that an individual takes to a landlord and says, I have this, I get this break on my rent, basically. That person could move around with that thing. You can't really count that.
Okay.
But a project-based voucher, which is awarded to a project and it maintains that affordability for 20, sometimes cases, 50 years, you can count that because you have a long duration in which that unit would remain affordable.
What's the shortest duration that one of those things is good for?
Well, like a housing choice voucher, I suppose somebody could have a month-to-month lease or
Sure,
something,
but I
yeah.
mean a project-based
I want to say the contracts are 15 to 20 years, but affordable housing projects don't just go for project-based vouchers from HUD. They also will go for tax credits from the state, things that come with regulatory agreements that guarantee that affordability for 50 to 55 years.
Right. I'm just trying to understand what potential there is for smaller landowners that
Yeah.
aren't going to do a giant, project like the Danco thing. What's the potential for smaller property owners that have a smaller project in mind to meet any of our RENA allocation? That's
Well,
what I'm trying to
they
understand.
almost certainly would probably be able to meet moderate, which is kind of market rate, or above moderate, which are nicer units. That's kind of a given. Any unit that's built in Blue Lake is probably going to meet either moderate or above moderate. Typically, units that are considered low income mostly happen through subsidies. If you're going to do ADUs, I mean, they often don't get into low income. Even if it's really small, I mean, you got to look at the amount they're charging per square foot. Is it truly a low income unit? And oftentimes those ADUs are not.
Okay.
We have a few questions on Zoom. Jean, would you like to go? And then Julie?
Yes, hi, this is Jean.
We can hear you.
Thank you. That's a lot of information. I do have a couple of questions. So when this is accepted, we're going to have single room occupancy units. I believe. Um, so say that somebody had 3 rooms and they rented out 3 bedrooms. They rented out 2 of the bedrooms. Would that be uh, one satisfy the units that are needed for the city? Am I making sense?
Did you have more questions, Jean, or do you want him to
Oh, yeah.
answer? Okay.
Yeah, and also it was specified that we had to have a piece of property that was emergency shelter. And I believe that it was at the end of Taylor Way that it was specified for that. Is that still in the plan? Is a question. And one more question. I noticed on the zoning that the park and the horse arena are both open space recreation. And I was wondering why that's not public facility. And that's it for my questions, and thank you.
Okay, so I think Gary, you could probably answer the first one anyway, and then maybe staff can answer concerning the emergency shelter.
I mean,
and
I can answer all of them.
yeah. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great.
So I'm not an expert on SROs, and I've never participated in counting those towards arena. But she's correct that in the implementation program HI1 that we are required to adopt rules in regards to SROs, single room occupancy. We could find out from the state how those are counted. I don't know that they're necessarily counted as a unit, but they are definitely encouraged because it's could be a potential form of more affordable housing.
Mhm. Yeah.
As far as emergency shelters, that was also something the state told us we had to implement in order to, I think they wanted it done before adoption of the housing element update because it's an old rule. And what it is that the city had to pick a zone somewhere to allow emergency shelters, somewhere that was an appropriate location. So we picked the opportunity zone. There's limited sites in the downtown and retail commercial and mixed use. Obviously, we're not going to have emergency shelters in a single family neighborhood. So we chose, the opportunity zone in the Powers Creek district. And that was already adopted by the council as part of this 3-year process. So sure, that's still part of the plan, and it was essentially already implemented. We don't know that there's a great need for emergency shelters in the city, but the opportunity zone would be the place where they would go if one was proposed. As far as the zoning for the parks, that's something that the city did, and probably the last time they did a more significant general plan update process. You have your public facility and you have your open space recreation zone. Some areas ended up as public facility. I mean, City Hall, the school, the old dump site, part of the river. But most of your parks and the creek and things like that ended up in the open space recreation zone. And that's how it's been. As I noted before, we had part of the creek and the levee trail in light industrial and industrial zoning since the 80s. And we fixed that with the Powers Creek District planning process to put those in open space recreation, which significantly limits any sort of development potential on those areas.
They were also at one time emergency accesses for our fire department to get in. The the uh, the trail on the side of the Powers Creek
The
was
Creek
supposed to be.
Trail, yeah.
Yeah, that was an emergency entrance for
Yeah.
vehicles.
Yeah, and then in the late 90s, the city adopted a trails plan, which identified that as part of the city's trail system. So it functions as both, really.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Julie, did you have a question for the planner concerning this?
Since this is mostly discussion, I just mostly have comments. This has been ongoing. Screen sharing, like our prior presenter did, would be greatly appreciated. I feel like some of my comments are more back on prior conversations. because I'm not able to look at the presentation. I will say this, other cities in California that can't accommodate due to infrastructure and rezoning, they are fighting it back against the city. And our ozone was supposed to work to accommodate work housing with our industrial. I think we really need to be direct and transparent within the housing element on our wastewater treatment and public safety before we continue to deny and allow hookups, and strategically in the back room shutting down the infrastructure that's meant to run the rest of this county. I just hope we have more attention on the timeline is all. Gary, you disclosed some really cool facts right around 8 o'clock, 8:05. Those comments that you made were very, very new, and I appreciate you for getting them out there. We'll have to go back to Justin's recording to get them. But you know, the state has allocated Humboldt's medium income to be around like 80 something, 85, 83,000 for a household of four. And that makes like, that's coming from, realistically, you're only sitting around like 53,000. The state is deciding what our medium income is. Then it's deciding what our true low income is. It's not even really, it's hypocritical, and we really should be attentive to that instead of bending a knee sometimes. But regardless, with the density bonus and the negative declaration, like that's trying to be crafted and pushed into this so that Danco can get their state funding, I think, and I really hope our next council can take more review on that. We're really going outside of state mandates. We're really kind of focusing in on how developers are streamlining everything that's going to happen here with regardlessness to the real infrastructure that we have going on, regardlessness to the environmental hazards that we already have going on, regardlessness to that we need those areas as open space, as additional parking, as a place to have any kind of Red Cross refugees. And we're already moving our courtyard out of there into a place that we can't even technically put it. So I just think there's a lot more review that's coming. And by December 10th, we need to know, do we have more time for public comment would be my only question. And is that public comment only going to be what is written and sent in? Or are you going to finally take the public comment that's been given to you guys over the last few years outside of written comment? Because the only thing that's been scripted in that so far has been written comment. And if that's going to be the way it's going to be, please disclose that to the public finally tonight and when they can finally get that into you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to answer any of those questions? Okay. Well, the written comment versus the oral comment. I mean, we have minutes of all of our council meetings, so I think that is reflected in um, the comments are reflected in our minutes.
Could I ask about the density bonus and how that could apply in Blue Lake specifically?
So the state has state density bonus law, which some of you may be familiar with. We're not actually proposing through the housing element update to adopt any local version of that. Many jurisdictions have. We're essentially just proposing to default to state law, whatever they require. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a community like Blue Lake to expend resources to do something that the state's essentially already doing. You know, what, if anything, we can just make reference in our code to whatever the current state law requires. That's what we'll do, basically.
Right.
So we're not proposing any type of density bonus. However, a developer could come in and propose coverage under state density bonus law and get certain increases based on the amount of affordable units they're proposing. They also could get exceptions or what they call concessions or waivers from development standards like height or setbacks or parking or things like that. So that's already existing state housing law, state density bonus law, and we would essentially just implement it as required by the state.
So can you give us an example? 1 acre parcel, which say if it's the Calgon Carbon area, if say, assume it was only 1 acre, somebody could come in and do 16 units with a maximum height of, was it 35?
It's 45 feet south
45.
of Taylor Way.
Okay. And so if somebody came in and did that, but then they wanted to apply the bonus, What does that mean? Does that mean they can go taller and they can do more than 16 units per acre?
There are allowances for height increases in state density bonus law.
Mhm.
Obviously, it allows higher densities. That's its main purpose.
Mhm.
So yeah, somebody could ask for coverage if they. And there's tables. Like it's hard. I'd have to look up the current table in state law and see what it says. But it's like okay, 10%. Affordable units. 10% of the units are affordable to lower income households. Then you get this many units. That kind of thing.
So
So you would just have to look at what the current requirements are.
so depending on your income level, you get a certain percentage of density, increase then.
Depending on the income level of the units you're proposing to construct. So state density bonus law is typically used with affordable housing projects because those meet the criteria for getting increased densities.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from council or public? Okay, so recommended action at this time is to receive the presentation and add the adoption of the housing element to the December 10th, 2024 meeting. So thank you, Gary, for all your hard work and especially the
Thank you.
great
So,
explanation.
do we wait till future agenda items to put that on there, or do we just say it now?
Yeah, we
I
can wait.
I would just like to put forth the concept that the new council is going to have a lot to do and process and deal with on December 10th, and I think that this presentation, we want to be able to give it as much time as it needs, and I think we probably shouldn't try to do it on December 10th. I think we should hold it to maybe our next full meeting so that we can give it all the time it deserves and give people an opportunity to process the information they've received tonight, um, and go from there.
So that would be like the January.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we have to notice for a public hearing. So obviously, we couldn't have gotten it on tonight for a public hearing because we don't have time.
Okay.
So the next meeting that we could have put it on was December 10th. And typically, when you get a recommendation from the planning commission, you want it to be timely. You want it to come to the commission as soon as it can, or sorry, the council as soon as it can. So that's in essence what we were doing.
Sure.
If there's a desire on the part of whatever the makeup of the new council is to have it be at a later meeting, then so be it. I mean, that's up to the council.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I personally just feel like there's going to be a lot of new people that are needing to get up to speed, and there's going to be other topics that will have to be addressed as well. So it just seems to me that it's going to be awfully crammed, and I think people just need a little bit of time to settle in before being asked to adopt something as
yeah.
monumentous as the housing element.
And in the past, it was not uncommon in Blue Lake to have multiple hearings before either the planning commission or city council before a recommendation was made or before something was adopted. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So it looks like something we could look at for the January 28th, 2025 meeting. When we
So
come
Gary,
to-
are you recommending that we still hold a public hearing on the 10th, but that they could potentially push adoption to their January meeting or
Yeah, I
consideration?
think
Yeah.
you should hold
Oh,
as many
okay.
public hearings
Yeah.
as you need
Yeah.
to.
Okay.
So
I
when
think
you
that's a
have
great
That's a
idea.
more formal setting for receiving public comment versus, this kind of
Right,
discussion.
which is something that one of the public members noted too, was that time for more public comment would be appreciated as well. So
Yeah,
I
and we
agree
could
with what Elise says. There's going to be a lot on their plate, but we can leave it up to that council to say we can adopt it now, or we can push it to the January meeting. And like Gary's saying, the more public comment, the better. So why not just leave it on there,
to
have
hold,
the public forum, and then you can push it back farther if you want more time.
Are you wanting to do a presentation again on the 10th, like you did tonight, or
whatever you guys would like done.
yeah.
Yeah.
what do you see as the public hearing consisting of?
Basically receiving public comment. If you would like a presentation on certain things, it would be good to notify staff of what that is. Are there remaining questions, outstanding issues, things like that?
Right.
And that way we can continue to narrow our focus on the remaining issues that the council would like to be addressed.
Right.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that could be addressed at the 10th from the public and the council to bring back to the January meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And this will be the second recording of this presentation that will be available as well. So the same presentation was given to the Planning Commission.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I think it would be really helpful for folks to have these videos linked on the website to where, you know, we can have a news item come up and we can say review the presentation on the housing element, you know, and they can just have links that are going to take them right to the right part of this meeting. And so we're going to make it easy for people to find what they're looking for. You know, if somebody sees, you know, a hearing notice, they're like, ah, something's coming up. Well, like in this case, there's a lot of information to review. If we can make that, you know, easily available, just that, you know, like a one-click kind of a deal. I'd really like to have that be part of what we offer on the website so people can get up to speed.
So right now under the general plan webpage that was created, which is, I'm really glad we have that. We have this current draft. We have the CEQA document. There was a few revisions made based on agency comments. That's up there. And I believe, do we have the presentation now as well? So we're trying to get as much info up there as
Okay.
possible for folks to review, but it's easy enough to go to, what is it, community and then general plan, and it'll take you to all those documents.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying which presentation is there
The one that you were just
on
given.
video?
No, but that's
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to get this video. I mean, I didn't watch the one from the Planning Commission.
I thought that
But
one was better, but
what
you're gonna put one up there.
well, I just
Yeah.
the question answer here was really helpful. And I don't know, did you have that at the Planning Commission as well?
We did, but they were different questions.
Yeah.
So maybe we put both of them up there,
There you
or
go.
we can splice in the question answer to one video or something.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful. I mean,
Sure.
I know the slides offer a certain amount of information, but I think the explanation really helps people grasp what this means and how it's applied. So
And of
I'd
course,
like to
Gary
try to make that available.
is available for anyone to call him and make an appointment to talk to him about anything.
Right,
or
Which
questions.
has happened. We've had a number of community members
Yeah.
come into office hours and want to sit down and go through the documents
Yeah.
and the CEQA document and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I just feel like if we have it on, you know, if we have a video recorded already, you know, if people have an opportunity to see that first, and then they can make an appointment to ask you different questions
sure.
or not.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is all we'll be doing this evening on this item.
Yes.
So we'll move on.
Looks like we had a comment here.
Oh, you've already had one comment for this. I'm trying to keep consistent with that.
Can we give her 20 seconds?
All right.
Quickly for one person.
Thank you. I think as we have another opportunity to examine the housing element, if we could also maybe incorporate that address some of the concerns about the circulation element and also parking requirements. So in other words, if you have a residential lot and now there's going to be 4 units there, are there any requirements for the number of cars that could be there and where they would be parked? Is it all on-street parking? Just basically, you know, trying to get to a little bit more granular level when we envision what this looks like. The more that we can explain and dispel fear, the more success I think that we could have with it. So circulation element and parking requirements.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on then to item 9. Second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2024-544. This is the metal roof ordinance. Thank you, Gary. Good night, Gary. And this is the second reading by title only of the new ordinance and the adoption of that ordinance, which will be adopted by a roll call vote. So, is there any further discussion from council about this issue? Anyone from public about this issue? Okay, back to council for a motion and a second.
I make a motion to accept. Second.
Okay, motion made by Christopher Edgar, seconded by Chris Fire to conduct the second reading and adoption of this ordinance by title only. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. It's an ordinance.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schultz,
Yes.
retired,
Yes.
Councilmember Stefani,
Yes.
Councilmember Edgar,
Yes.
Okay, it is unanimous. I will read this. The second reading and adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Blue Lake to amend section 17.24.260 of the Blue Lake Municipal Code, adding metal roofing to the design standards.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, they're coming up quite often.
Ever was it
So long.
Why was it against the rules?
It's just,
Fine.
we're a little.
There
trying
used to be metal roofs don't look like metal roofing today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, tin roofs and
Corrugated
stuff.
Right,
steel,
tin
yeah.
corrugated nastiness. Yeah.
The old galvanized steel
Yeah.
roof. I don't make it
Let's
like
go.
that.
Okay, we are on consent agenda. There's September 24th minutes, salary scale adjustment, and the warrants and disbursements. I suggest that Christopher excuse himself for B and C.
Yep.
So,
All right.
Well, we're going to
Okay.
break everything out, aren't we?
Yeah, so it looks like we're gonna do minutes, 10A. Are there any corrections or additions, I guess?
So there are a few corrections to be made, I think.
We have a minutes correction mailer from Michelle Lewis Lusso. So is it? Yep. Public. Yeah, but it pertains to.
Correct. Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, it should be on the
Yep.
minute.
Okay, perfect.
Just-
Thank you.
Her name should not be Melissa, it's Michelle. Okay?
Yep.
We got that.
Thank you.
And the other comment about Julie Christie's comment, and I have to find that here. Take me just a second. Wait.
Page 3. Where she agrees with you.
Well, there's the thing where it says totally off topic.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I'd like that to be removed because it's kind of judgmental and unprofessional, so I don't think it should be in there.
I apologize. The way we have the minutes structured, Tony takes public comment and I take council discussion.
Mhm.
So I didn't catch that. I apologize. That should be in the meeting minutes.
Okay.
We will correct that.
Thank you.
Any other corrections or additions to the minutes of September 24th, 2024?
And Julie's got her hand raised.
Yeah.
We're done.
Kat and then Julie. Go ahead.
Super quick, under Cat Napier, this is item 3, Cat Napier.
What page are you on?
It's page 2, item 3, public comment. Second line, manager quickly facilitated meeting with herself, SHN representative, and Cat. The RA owner was not present at that meeting. So I would strike and RA owner. RAO owner. He wasn't there at that one. Thank you.
Oh. Okay. All right. And Julie, did you have a comment on the minutes of September 24th?
Yes, it'll be very quick, and thank you for taking my comment. Elise, thank you for catching that. Within the packet that we had to check out for this week, and we always get it last minute, I actually just always put a grain of salt for the minutes. However, at the last planning commission, I really did commend them, you guys. We've gotten to have this habit of being very interesting with what public comment is saying. And the one habit that I do not like to have is that they made comment. I don't care if you say I'm off topic. I don't care. But don't just list me as making a comment without at least trying to review the key points that those comments were. Otherwise, within your minutes, maybe you could be polite and put a link to Justin's recordings that any other prior discretion upon meetings can be viewed upon this recording now that you're paying him. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other further comments about the minutes? All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes with those corrections and additions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Angela Shaw, seconded by Christopher Edgar to accept the meeting minutes of September 24th, 2024 with the noted corrections and additions. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Let the minutes reflect that Christopher Edgar is now leaving the building as we discuss items 2B, the salary scale adjustment, and 10B and 10C, October warrants and disbursements. Were there any questions or comments about the salary scale adjustment?
Just so I understand it correctly, this, the rounds fee is a flat rate paid to
Yes.
whoever does the rounds. So
Yes.
it's being bumped up $50 to accommodate the additional time for field work.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Any other questions or comments about item 10B? Then I'll entertain a motion to
Wait, public comment.
Yeah, we can do that before or after. All right, any public comment about the salary plan adjustment from public? Back to council for a possible vote.
I move we accept it.
Second.
Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Angela Shaw to accept the 2024-2025 salary plan adjustment. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. And we are now on the warrants and disbursements. Any questions from council first on the warrants and disbursements?
I have one. So Alves Roofing, I'm assuming, well, Alves Inc. It's check number 12366. Can I guess that that's from Crash Hall, or is it something else?
What's it? 11,000.
11,383.
Yeah, so that is the that was the balance remaining for the new roof for Crash Hall.
So can you tell us what exactly happened on Crash Hall? Did it get a whole new roof, a full tear off, or what happened?
Yes, it got a full new roof. The sheeting was fine. Originally, we were going to do a re-roof because we thought there was only one roof on there. When they got into the building, they realized that there were actually two already on the building, and so we did a full tear off and re-roof.
Good.
And so went down to plywood sheathing.
Yes,
And what type of roof did it have? Did it get?
it's a asphalt composite shingle. Yeah.
Okay. And so what was the full cost of that?
The total cost was about 54,000.
That's not bad with the cost of roofing these days.
Yeah, no, we lucked out.
Yeah.
Well, and they gave us a really good deal on it as well. We actually were able to buy the shingles early on, so we got a really good deal on those before the pricing structure went up. And then because of kind of the miscalculation on their part, not seeing that there was a second roof, they gave us a pretty steep discount on that as well. So I think
Cool.
on the extra, they basically took off their profit. So, which was really
What's
nice.
the square footage of that roof? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's several thousand square feet.
Okay.
And then on check number 12419, RAO construction, 297,000. Now that is our truck route, and is how much of that is left to pay?
Sorry?
How much of the truck route is left to pay?
So we have made, I believe, 2 payments on that. The total contract was almost 1.5 million.
Oh,
So we have a substantial amount left to pay.
yeah.
A lot of it is paving. So
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or concerns about the warrants? Anyone from public on the warrants? Back to council for the acceptance of the warrants and disbursements.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Angela Shaw, seconded by Chris Fire to accept the October warrants and disbursements. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. I have to
You
call.
need to go find Mr.
Yeah.
Okay. She wants to stretch her right.
Yeah.
Get that Peter workout.
I know. Yeah. There's a breeze warning in effect tonight.
I wore my life jacket.
Go home and cover it with lemon tree.
Speaking of freezing,
I love my
Yeah.
lemons.
All right, we are back and we are now on the council correspondence. We have, oh, that was concerning let's see, we have something from Kent Sawatsky. Public comment agenda item with number 3, approval of the agenda. Was this supposed to be read during the approval of the agenda?
Well, we moved.
Yeah.
You request to move some items on.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
One of them we already addressed, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then free thought day is some correspondence considering that the Blue Lake Council members make a statement that rejects project 2025. And that came in as correspondence. Lori Ponte mentioned her letter that was, I think it was emailed to me. I don't know if everyone else got the email on it.
I think it was just to you and Elise and Mandy. I remember.
Yeah, I saw it either. Somewhere.
I would just like to comment on Lori's letter, where she did ask that there be a report on the Danco project and the RV park project. And during our agenda setting committee meeting, we felt that it was appropriate for the next substantial update on those two items to come before the new council. And I think currently both of those projects are kind of in a holding pattern. So I don't know that there's a lot or any new information to share. But I think that that's going to be coming forward in the coming months with the new council.
Right. And we did get a final report about the Storyland project. And then the Danco project is ongoing. So yeah, there'll be something good for the new year.
And oh yeah, that reminds me. So Mandy, you mentioned that there is a videotaped presentation of the full Storyland,
Mm-hmm.
and that exists in the course of various commission.
Actually, I provided it to council. I did a full presentation on
Yeah.
the Storyland project to council with
So
a
it's
slide
within
presentation. It's
a
been recorded.
council meeting,
Yeah.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
The 7-minute
It's been
video.
presented at all the commissions and to the city council.
okay.
It's like a 11 or 13-minute video.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if we could, yeah, I'm hoping we can get that video and whatever part of the council meeting addresses questions and answers, and discussion on that, and then we can post that to the website, um, to its own little spot, so people who want an update can go there and watch that at their leisure. I'm hoping that the website can serve to inform people in a way that is not labor intensive for staff, so that somebody can have easy access to the information that we can offer. And then if they have continued questions, that they can come to the council and ask for an agenda item or go to staff to clarify questions or whatever. But I'd like to be able to use that website, to its best advantage and save everybody some time.
I agree. We have contracted with the webmaster. I'm going to call him. I can't remember his name.
Andy.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
Andy. I mean, maybe that's something that he can look at to make it a little easier for people to access.
Well, that's kind of on us. That part's on us because we need to assemble the material and we can publish to that. We could give it to him and ask him to put it there as well. But like we would have to identify the information. We'd have to say, okay, here's that presentation, here's the video, and the video part that we want linked is at this point in the video, and this sort of thing. So yeah, we have some work to do on the front end, and then he could make that he could actually publish it to the right the designated spot on the website.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The idea that you had that somebody could look at our minutes and say, well, I want to see just the discussion of the Storyland project, for instance. I mean, is that something that would be easier for him to do? I mean, we're publishing the minutes and we're publishing the
Well, that would be pretty labor
announcement.
intensive for him to do
I
it, and
know.
we're paying him $45 an hour. So I think we probably have some staff that could identify it more quickly than he could.
Hmm.
And potentially, break that out so that we could, just hand it over to him for the technical parts. I mean, we're not hiring. From my perspective, we're not hiring him to do the research.
Yes. But it just seems like a lot
That's something that
to
could
do.
be discussed.
Something more technical. Yeah. All right. So we are now past the council correspondence and on to reports of council and staff.
So as we mentioned earlier, under the city manager's report, AI, I'd like to pull that and add that to a closed session agenda item.
Well, I was going to have us first do reports of council.
Oh, sorry. I thought
No
we'd already
problem.
done that.
No,
Jesus,
no.
sorry.
So
Late.
let's go around. It's okay.
I
Christopher,
crossed it
did
out
you?
too.
It's okay. Christopher, did you attend any meetings that you would like to report on?
No, I did not attend any meetings, but in good faith
Good.
of being city personnel, I'll tell you that we survived this big storm.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. Luke was there, and we did it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good job.
Well done, guys.
Lots of sandbag distribution.
Yeah, we actually had over 500 sandbags put out.
Wow. That's good. That's
And
awesome.
a couple trees. I noticed you guys with
Most of those went to the bike
loader on
park.
the lawn out here.
What was that?
95% went to the bike park.
I wasn't going to say that. Yeah, we did. What was that again?
I missed that. 95% went to where?
To the bike park.
Yeah.
To hold down the
sandbags?
tarps.
To hold down.
Oh, the sandbags. I see. Yes, yeah.
So you mentioned trees. What?
What was there some tree damage over here?
Oh yeah, well it split in two, and then it was rotted on the inside, so we took that one out. It fell across the South Road.
Any other significant stuff?
No, nothing. We found some blockages and unblocked them. Found some I&I that we're trying to fix right now, and
I&I? What's I&I?
intrusion, like what do you call it?
Infiltration.
Stormwater intrusion.
Intrusion.
I
and
noticed there was a little
Infiltration.
Infiltration.
a little part of the new paving that came apart up here.
We have our first pothole.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So that'll all be remediated. So there's parts of the asphalt. I think towards the end when it was getting cold, parts of the asphalt didn't hold together. So Mercer Fraser will come out and regrind and repave.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Saw that.
Bummer.
Okay. Lise, did you attend the meeting?
I did. I went to a public safety commission meeting, and there was a discussion about the talks with Ferndale for law enforcement, and it's right there.
Another meeting you went to? Parks and Rec?
We went to Parks and Rec, but we chatted about that at the last meeting.
Okay.
But yeah, the safety commission has formed an ad hoc committee to take part in the discussions with Ferndale. And I did also go to an RCA meeting, and we had a very, very, very short agenda. So there was nothing major to report there. As you know, Beth Burks is going to be our new director, and I believe she's starting after the new year. I watched the Ferndale council meeting where they they discussed continuing talks with Blue Lake about law enforcement, and that was an interesting conversation to witness. And so they all approved that,
Mhm.
and I think that's all I got.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I attended a Humboldt Waste Management Authority meeting, and the reason the packet is so big is because we went through our financials. We had our 2024 financial report. We approved the revised account clerk job description. We had a request for bids for a scale replacement project. And then we received a proposed timeline draft request for proposals for organics processing feasibility study. That goes along with 1383, as State Bill 1383. And then that was basically all we did there. I attended a Humboldt County Association of Governments meeting, and it was rather quick because we just went into closed session because Beth Burks is going to RCEA, and so we are now contracting to look for a new executive director. And it could be someone local or it could be someone from out. And the only other thing I want to announce is this Saturday is the Arts and Crafts Fair from 11 to 4 at the Mad River Grange. Woohoo! Woohoo!
When? What day? What's that?
This Saturday, November 30th, from 11 to 4 at the Mad River Grange is the museum-sponsored arts and craft fair
Cool.
and food made by the Wanika Club.
Yes. Since you mentioned the Grange, I'd like to add that there's a remodeling committee of which I am a part, and there's going to be a pretty substantial remodel happen in the main hall at the Grange, and that's going to get started. I think we decided to start it in January.
I thought January 13th
Yeah.
was the date item. No? Oh, okay.
I think that's right. We've batted around a lot of dates, so it's gonna have to get straight.
Okay. Moving along to Angela Shell.
REDAC last night, we did not have a quorum.
Oh.
So that was not, which is okay. We just didn't have any action to take action on. However, we held our meeting at the North Coast Growers Association new facility over off of Erickson and West End Road, and we got a tour of the facility, which was really gorgeous. The folks over there talked about the harvest hub that is going on. In essence, what they're doing is they've contracted with local farmers to provide fruits and vegetables to local schools and businesses in Humboldt and Trinity and Del Norte counties right now, and so not just schools, but particularly Food for People. They're not really advertising to restaurants just yet because the demand is greater than what is being produced at this point. And so one of the things that they are working on is helping to connect farmers with grants and opportunities to be able to expand their production, with the goal of being able to put more local goodies into local restaurants. But that was a really cool component of what they're doing. Fun fact, Arcata has the longest continuous certified farmers market in the entire state of California since 1980.
Amazing.
Super cool. But beyond that, what North Coast Growers Association is working on, they've got a couple other big projects that they're working on. They are working with Redwood Region Rise and writing a proposal for the Catalyst Fund to be able to do really two projects. One is to be able to create a new facility to butcher and process local meat, since Redwood Meat is no longer doing that, and also to be able, and Thomas from Foggy Bottom Boys is really spearheading that campaign. The other thing that they're working on too is cold storage and ice distribution as a result of what's happening at Pacific Choice Seafood, and the fact that the two main cold storage facilities that were privately owned are also out of business. And so one of the things that has been a big topic of conversation with their membership is that what's happening is that all of these facilities that were privately owned and worked really well back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, um, are closing, and that's leaving local food source in a lurch. And so North Coast Growers Association membership, which is not technically a co-op, but they are banding together to be able to create a solid food sustainability program for our region. Um, because, as noted, OES in all of their magical emergency planning has nothing in place for food sustainability. And so, you know, uh, and so that's one of the things that they've been considering, and how to feed students and how to feed elders and how to feed, folks in the event of a major catastrophe, but also to be able to stabilize food sources up here, in a broad capacity. And the third really, really exciting thing is, if you haven't heard what's going on at Del Norte with their fish market, they have at their dock, they've created a fish market, and they are doing fish taco Fridays with their schools. So they're selling, yeah, the fishermen are selling fish to the local schools and creating a relationship there. So based upon that, the North Coast Growers Association and I'm going to speak long on this. I don't care what time it is because this is a super, super, super cool, exciting thing. So bear with me. Um, but Greenway is a group that is working with North Coast Growers Association. In essence, what they've done is they've researched Bellingham, Washington's dockside market and what they've been able to do, and they're putting something together for Matticat Plaza in Eureka, with an opening date of May 2025. And the intention is to have a biweekly fisherman's market. And they are already in contracts with Eureka City Schools to sell fish to them so that they can start selling and providing locally grown fish to the students there, and using them as kind of a litmus test for what that looks like for other local schools. So it was super informative. If you ever get a chance to talk with Megan or Ashley out there, it's just the two of them, and they are making some serious magic happen. They are pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Christopher.
No correspondence. Unfortunately, I was ill last Monday, so I couldn't make the Arts and Heritage Commission.
Yeah, and I didn't make it either.
But it's going around.
Yeah. Got it.
I'm all good now.
All right. Manager's report. We talked about the site management at 200 Taylor Way. There's been a suggestion that they go into closed session at the next meeting. Is that the pleasure of the council?
Yes, indeed.
If that's what we need to do to discuss it, then we should do that.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then-
if council's not prepared to act on my recommendation, then I would recommend that you go into, you have this for a closed session.
And were you going to announce this vacancy?
Oh, yes. So unfortunately, I think most people know Annalie is going to be leaving us. We're super sad.
Excited for
But
her.
she's got a really exciting new opportunity. So we're really excited for her. Obviously sad to see her go, but not to rain on her parade. And we wish her all the best at her new position with Arcata Fire. She's not going to be a firefighter yet, but maybe she will join as a volunteer.
They're not going to love you like we do.
I
I'm just going
know,
to tell you that right now.
I
I'm joking.
told her
They
all
will.
about it.
They will.
Smelly. I don't know. So yes, so we are. Tony has been acting in the deputy role, and she has let us know that she's interested in moving into the clerk position. She's been doing a great job. She's also been doing all of the planning commission work and helping with all the agendas. So I'm really happy about that. And then we had planned to move Annalie into Vicky's position because Vicky is retiring. So we're making some adjustments there, and we have released a position for a finance manager. So please spread the word. We're trying to get that out onto the widest market possible. So it's listed right now on Craigslist and different. We're getting it loaded to Indeed, and yeah, spread the word. So we'll be taking applications as they come in and conducting interviews as they come in because we do have, there's a lot to learn. We're hoping that we can attract someone who's got some knowledge. Fund accounting is kind of a specialized skill set that's not kind of your everyday bookkeeping skill set. So we'll be looking for someone who probably comes from maybe another municipality to fill that position. So
That's full time.
it is full time, fully
Yeah.
benefited. Yeah, it's a great position.
So what has Vicky said about her retirement date?
We are in negotiations.
I'm gonna be like house to be kept in.
It just depends on if we get applicants, if we get someone who has experience, if we get someone who can come in and take right over. We're not sure. The job market is it's pretty tight right now, but um, so everyone wants accountants and people with fiscal finance background. So we're gonna just have to see what we get. But she's flexible. She'll work with us.
There's a whole group of folks graduating from Cal Poly here in a couple of weeks with their BS and
Yeah.
BS in accounting.
Yes,
So
it's a great opportunity. I mean,
yeah.
we're a small city, but we're busy.
Yeah.
We have a lot of moving parts and things are going to slow down a little bit. We've had a lot of grants that we've been writing grants and bringing in money and projects more so than the city probably has done in 50 years. And so it has been extremely busy, but we're starting to see we're kind of on the tail end of it a little bit, closing out a lot of projects. And so we're hoping that moving into the winter, things are going to kind of slow down a little bit and kind of equalize a bit. But we've been saying that for a few years now. That hasn't happened.
Just
So
because we're a small city doesn't mean we don't have all the
we do all the same
regulations
things
that we have to go
absolutely.
through. Yeah, that large city.
We've just had a lot of
With a
big
smaller
projects. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
lots
we
of
have a
stuff.
lot going on in Blue Lake.
Yeah.
All right, future agenda items. We've discussed the closed session. We discussed the housing element.
Housing element. Yeah.
Yeah. So all that brought back.
I will just say too, real quickly, it's fun being out and about in the community and in the job that I'm doing, and people commenting on the excitement around all of the fun things, not the fun, but all of the moving parts that are happening in Blue Lake. And there's a lot of conversation outside of Blue Lake about what's going on, and it's gained. So there's traction being gained well outside of the city limits about the bike park and about construction and about the town square and all the other things. And so there's word is spreading. So it's exciting. It's exciting to hear.
I second that. There's a
Yeah.
lot.
That's right.
Yeah.
And December 7th is our 4 o'clock Christmas parade, tree lighting.
Oh yeah.
5 o'clock.
/ my birthday celebration.
Should have an idea about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Could
Make sure you put happy
make you a
birthday
cake
Chris. Then
on,
miss.
on your
Right.
lit up lawnmower.
Right.
Okay. So
Alrighty.
we need
Are we on future agenda items now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you have something for future agenda item?
I don't know if it should be in a future agenda item, but I wanted to bring it up as I agreed with a public comment about having a liaison with the public works, and I would, after being off of city council, I'd be willing to put together like a monthly correspondence or some answer any questions at a meeting if you guys would want that.
That's a
in the
great idea.
future.
Nice.
And I don't know if that should be on a agendized item or how that would work.
I would probably do it quarterly,
Quarterly?
just based upon kind of
Yeah, because we don't have.
because I'm also the director of public works. too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be something that we could put together, kind of report of like infrastructure
Yeah.
improvements, how many issues we've had, whatever. But
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
That's a nice
Yeah.
idea. I see a hand. Julie, did you have a comment on future agenda items?
Yeah, thank you for taking public comment Is there a particular reason we did not take public comment on the last few agenda items? Okay. Well, anyways, for future
Council
agenda items, yes. We missed correspondences and reports. I just want to jump back to Shoal. If you can keep your reports up for all the entities that you're really productive in, I really appreciated all your reports, Angela. And
Thank you.
maybe keep, yeah, I really did. You did a lot, Elise. And so just I'm sorry I'm on the wrong topic, but new agenda. Yes, I know Mandy's in charge of public works. But it's always great when we have somebody outside of that in their sphere of influence to give a report. I think it's amazing. So thank you guys. I concur with Christopher with that agenda item.
All right, we are now on adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Elise Scafani motions to adjourn. Chris Fire seconds. Is there any further discussion? Any discussion from public? Back to council for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.